This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Bryan, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. And there, when the sky was darkest, was a glimmer of hope. Was it the moon? No. It was Michael Sheen. It's New Moon, and this film is lit. Oh, welcome back to This Film's Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We are elbow deep in the new moon, or the Twilight Saga. We just wrapped up our reading and watching of Twilight Saga New Moon.
Halfway point.
The halfway point in the book series, the 2/5 point in the movie series. That'll be fun. We get to do two. Yeah. We're going to do 2 episodes. They'll be back to back. I think,
yeah, it'll be the same as if you listened to our Harry Potter
yeah.
series. We did we read the last book, and then we did an episode on movie 1, and then the next week an episode on movie 2.
Yeah, so they'll be back to back.
Having a prequel in between them.
No prequel, no other movie in between. They'll just be boom, boom, back to back. So that's what you can look forward to for when we get to that. But we'll talk about Michael Sheen when we talk about him. As I mentioned in the intro there. We have almost all of our normal segments. We do not have, well, I say that, and that's not true. We don't have like any of our normal segments. Yeah. I forgot we're back to not
we have our normal Twilight segments.
Our normal Twilight segments, which includes our first one, which is Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
If you're new here or don't know anything about Twilight, haven't read, haven't seen them, that's fine. You can still listen and enjoy the episode, and we'll give you a brief little rundown about what happened in New Moon. The second installment in the Twilight Saga sees Bella get injured while at the Cullens, causing Edward to freak out and push the entire family to leave Forks. He breaks up with her, and Bella then sinks into a deep depression. Bella begins to pull herself out of that depression after hanging out with Jacob Black, who we met in the first movie and book, but then he seems to abandon her as well. She finds out that Jake has become a werewolf, but before she can really do anything about that information, Alice returns to Forks and whisks Bella off to Italy to save Edward from committing suicide, which he is doing because he thought that Bella had committed suicide.
Yes.
Hence fulfilling their Romeo and Juliet parallels.
Yes, it's not subtle.
No. After rescuing Edward, the Cullens vote to turn Bella into a vampire, and Edward says that he'll do it, but only if she marries him. It's against his wishes. This whole premise is he does not want her to become a vampire. Meanwhile, Jacob reminds them that if any of the Cullens bite a human, they will break the treaty that goes back centuries, and the wolf pack will have to go to war with the vampires. That's pretty much what happens in this one. Mm-hmm. 60% of it is just Bella and Ed and Jacob hanging out.
Pretty much.
Just like the first one. Let's get into some of those differences and start with what was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
All right. I didn't have a ton of stuff for better in the book. And we'll see. I had stuff.
Yeah.
But not as much as some of the other segments, I feel like.
Yeah, but my better in the book was a little bit shorter. My first note here jumped straight to her birthday party at the Cullens.
Yeah. I didn't have anything until page 100.
Yeah.
So
Emmett gives her a car radio, which he puts in her truck, and he's out installing it when she unwraps the empty box, and she just says, "Thanks, Emmett," and you can hear him laughing. Yeah. A ways away outside.
Yeah, out in the distance.
Yeah. Yes. Which I thought was kind of a funny way to show that he can still hear her.
Yeah, because of his vampire abilities. Yeah, that is true. That is a fun little... I forgot about that gag. I've read this book over the course of quite a while, so some of the early stuff I was starting to forget. I read the last half within the last week, few days, but the first 100 pages I read 3 weeks ago, so I don't remember it all in perfect detail. One of the things I did remember was that there's a little throwaway line when she's in school. This is after the breakup, where Edward leaves. She's in school and she's looking for a distraction, and they're studying Animal Farm in her English class or in her lit class, and she says, "We were working on Animal Farm. I didn't mind communism." And I was like, "All right, Comrade Bella, I see you over here." I don't think that's what she meant. She said she didn't mind communism because it was a ready distraction from her miserable, sad life. But still, it made me chuckle.
So one of the changes that the movie does make. So in the book, after Edward leaves, Bella discovers that if she experiences a jolt of adrenaline, if she does something dangerous and she gets like an adrenaline high, she can hear Edward's voice in her head.
And this is tied into the idea that because she made a promise to Edward when he left, he said, promise me something, don't do anything reckless.
Yeah.
Basically. And she goes, okay, I promise. So that's kind of what is the inciting incident for this recurring psychosis, as it were. That's not the right word, but hallucination.
Yeah. So in the book, she hears him in her head whenever she does something dangerous, like admonishing her and telling her to
don't,
stop.
Bella, stop, whatever. Yeah.
In the movie,
yeah,
she like straight up hallucinates him as like a ghost vampire standing next to her.
Surely they did this so that Edward was just like at least somewhat in the movie, like people could still see him and be reminded of him, I guess, because I did think, or to maybe clear up any confusion with potentially like the voiceover, it would be obvious to me, I feel like, who.
Yeah, I do wonder if maybe they were worried that if they just had a voiceover, that it wouldn't read as like her hallucinating him.
Yeah.
That, like maybe.
Well, but see, this you say that how were you going to say maybe it would read as what?
I don't know.
As him communicating telepathically?
Maybe telepathically.
Because that's legit what I thought reading the book, what was happening for like a while. I legitimately thought that he had come up with a way to somehow like one way communicate, because
shout at her.
It's not outlandish because
the brain sphere.
Yeah, because we know that he can sense people's emotions and stuff. So I thought, okay, maybe he figured out a way to and the whole thing is that he can't with her, like he can't read her thoughts.
Right, he can't read her thoughts,
but maybe somehow there's something where she's in peril, he senses it and can somehow like mind blast a warning to her. But then there's some moments later on in the book where it becomes obvious that that's not what's going on, that it is in fact just like her hallucinating this or somehow.
She's like hearing his voice in her head, and in the movie she sees hallucinations of him, and it's so troubling.
Yeah.
I don't think this troubled me as like a 16-year-old. As an adult, this deeply troubles me. The text, both texts, the book and the movie, treat this as like not that big of a deal.
It never gets brought up.
And I'm like, this is a big deal, you guys. She's hallucinating.
Yeah.
This is not okay.
This is a point to talk about it now. I had this in my general notes, but this is, since we're discussing the whole hallucination thing, it makes sense now. I thought it was really weird that she has a line later in the book where after she's reunited with Edward, she's considering mentioning to him that she was hearing his voice. And she says, would he think I was crazy like everyone else? That's the verbatim line from the book. And I'm like, did I miss? She didn't tell anybody else about this.
I don't think she
right?
might.
Did I miss?
She might have
told
Alice. She might have told Alice, but if she did, there wasn't like a big thing made out of it, or I would have remembered. I think she might
tell her on the plane.
Yeah.
While they're flying to Italy. But I don't remember making a big deal out of it, and I don't remember. And she says, "Will he think? Like I said, would he think I was crazy like everyone else?" And I'm like, "But nobody.
I mean, maybe she's just
implying.
Maybe she's just referring to the general of like people think that she's like gone off the deep end because she's been in like this zombie state of depression for so long.
Fair enough. The way I read it was like explicitly about the voice thing, and I was like, but
well,
you
it
didn't
does sound
totally-
like that the way that it's phrased.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very, very troubling. She should see someone.
Yes, you should tell
talk to somebody.
Yeah. And even once they're reunited and it stops, there's something you gotta talk. There's something potentially, you gotta have discussed there.
Yeah.
And like figure out, because like that could be, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's some sort of sign of like an early sign of potential like any manner of like potential cognitive like issues potentially. Like if you're having legit auditory hallucinations and like hearing voices, I would think you should definitely talk, even if it stops for a while. You should probably still talk to somebody about it.
Should probably yeah.
The
movie also skips over. There is a kind of brief plot point when she's hanging out with Jacob before he becomes a werewolf, where she tells him about the meadow that she and Edward went to without really telling him why she wanted to go there.
Yeah, she's like, oh, it's just this cool place.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I don't know where it is. But I want to find it again. And he's like got his like compass.
Yeah,
and his like map and everything.
Fully pioneering. Yeah.
He goes like full Boy Scout.
Yeah,
and they're trying to find the meadow again.
Yeah,
which I get why the movie cut that, but I did think it was kind of cute, and it was something that they did besides just like fix motorcycles. I
will say that is one of the things that the movie does, which is maybe a weakness, and so I guess I could mention it here and better in the book, is that it does, and it's a similar thing to what we commented on the first one, is that it does, because of the time limits of a movie, it's a 2-hour movie, they don't have a lot of time, it does shortchange a little bit of Bella and Jacob's relationship. A little bit. I think it does actually a better job than the first one with Bella and Edward.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of us understanding why they hang out and why they get along and what makes them like attracted to each other and that sort of thing. Even though it's sort of an incongruous attraction, but still like why they're friends, why they enjoy each other's company so much. It does a much better job of that in this movie than it does in Twilight, but it's still a little bit shortchanged, and we do miss some of those elements of them, like you said, going and looking for the meadow and doing more stuff together than just like the kind of montage we get with the motorcycles and stuff. But that works that's serviceable for what the movie is doing. So I did think, though, one of the times they're going out to drive the motorcycles, I think is when it happens. There's the scene where they in the movie and the book where Bella first sees somebody jump off the cliff that becomes a thing later in the film. And the way it's portrayed in the movie is she sees people like fighting, and it's Sam and like his friends or whatever, and they're like the pack, and they're like fighting on top of this cliff in the movie. And then she sees them and she goes, oh, what are they doing? And then they like throw one off, and she's like, ah. But there's something about the way it's described in the book that to me was more chilling and like more like, what the heck? Because the way it's described as her seeing it in the book is it's just Sam, I think, that she sees by himself, and she can't see the bottom of the cliff, and so she doesn't know how tall it is or what's going. And then he just jumps off of it, and she's like, what? Like she gets very confused and thought she just like saw somebody kill themselves. Yeah, and is like very upset. And then the similar thing happens. They pull over and Jacob explains, but something about the way it was written in the book. I don't know if I could find it. I don't think I have a page number here. But the way it's described in the book to me was more impactful and more chilling. And the movie just kind of turns it into like I don't know. It's a little sillier. Not that it's bad. I just prefer the way it was written in the book.
Well, there's not as much of like an implication of danger in the movie, I think. Because she can see that the ocean is right there. Yeah. And whereas in the book, she's looking at them from like the opposite, I think.
To me, it feels like in the book they're like at a weird turn or something where she can't see. She can only see like the top of the cliff, and she can't tell where the water is. Yeah, and we immediately can see that it's not that high or that it's hot. I don't know. It's just something about the way it plays out in the book and the movie didn't translate the same like sort of initial fear turned to like relief. I don't know. It just didn't work for me the way it did in the book. Bella ends up in the book in the ER twice in a week. And they never go to the ER at all in this one. She bangs her head, and they never really address, I guess, how she gets it fixed. Like in the movie, Jacob puts the shirt on her, and I don't remember what they do or how they fix it. I don't know if it's addressed. They just fix it, so whatever. In the movie, she has to go get stitches at the emergency room, and then they go out and ride, or in the book, and then the next week she goes out to ride they go out to ride motorcycles again, and she falls and gets a concussion and has to go back to the emergency room. And I was like, 2 emergency trips in 1 week in America? Bella, you trying to bankrupt your father? What is going on?
Charlie's up all night with the ER bill spread out over the table. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. I was like, and the book never even comments on it, though. They're just like, nah. I mean, maybe that's Stephanie Meyer's, like, privilege. Like, maybe she doesn't understand. Like, she's only ever had good insurance, and she doesn't understand that, like, just going to the ER. And because it's implied that, like, Bella's dad, while he has a good job, they're not wealthy they're not even, they're like middle class.
He's the police chief.
He's the sheriff, but it's a tiny town.
In a teeny tiny little town, which I guess he probably has some kind of like, I don't know, like union
maybe
insurance or something, but who knows how good it is.
Yeah, who knows? And also, but it could also be one of those things where this could be potentially one of those like small town America things where maybe going to the ER. And now this was the mid 2000s, which is also when it's set. So it's probably, I mean, definitely in a small town in the 80s, if you went to like the local like hospital that was like 3 doctors or whatever, or however many, and you're the daughter of the sheriff, they'd probably pull you in there and stitch you up for free and send you home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They might just like, oh, it's the sheriff's daughter, let's stitch her up. And maybe that's
she's
even
in here twice a week.
Maybe
guys,
that's it.
Fine.
Maybe because she is the sheriff's daughter, like, there's
maybe.
some thing. Maybe she's on the same. Maybe she has good insurance because of that. But it just was funny to me that it's never like sort of touched upon. It's just like a foregone conclusion that you got hurt, just go right to the emergency room. I was like, all right.
Honestly, that does sound like some privilege on the part of the author. Like maybe she's never been to the emergency room. Maybe she's never had to deal with medical bills.
Yeah,
and she just doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. Or it just felt like it wasn't important. But it was funny to me because it was mentioned twice that she goes to the emergency room. I was like, good Lord. I'm still paying off 1 emergency room visit from 4 years ago. I did not like the scene in the movie where Jacob. So this is after the movie scene, and Jacob is starting to he cuts his hair, and he won't answer the phone. Bella's been trying to call him and won't answer. And it's kind of done in a short montage in the movie, and then so she drives over to confront him, and he just. It's pouring down rain, and they have this conversation, and it's a scene right out of the book, but. For some reason, in the movie, it did not work for me. It seemed so out of nowhere. Jacob's like, which is intentional to some extent, but his because he's such a jerk to her all of a sudden, like just a giant jerk. He's just like, leave me alone. What are you doing? Like he just goes from like normal to like a huge raging asshole. From one scene to the next, and then, which is not entirely dissimilar from what happens in the book, but in the book. For some reason, it felt less, maybe partially because from my memory in the scene in the book, Sam and them are like nearby where they can hear him. And it feels like he's maybe putting on a bit of a show for them. Whereas in the movie, they're across an entire field and it's just him and her talking. The way that scene plays out in the movie felt completely like if I hadn't read the book, I wouldn't get what this interaction was and why he had and now again you're not supposed to understand yet why this is going on, but they never come back and address it. Like Jacob comes back and is like, I'm sorry earlier I was being a jerk, but they never I feel like the movie never goes into why he was being a jerk. Maybe it does, and I don't know, something about the way that scene plays out. I also think that Taylor Lautner in that scene maybe just doesn't do a great job. Maybe it's the performances that make it not work for me. It just feels so like this weird stilted, like I'm angry, I'm mad. None of that scene worked for me. The one in the rain where she confronts him and then he's like just yelling at her and stuff. I didn't really like it in the book either. to be fair. That whole section where she doesn't know why Jacob's being a jerk, I just found incredibly frustrating to read. I did like that eventually, and we'll get to it because it happens in the movie and the book, but I did like eventually that they sorted it out relatively quickly and that we didn't spend like chapters and chapters of Bella like not understanding why like what the secret is and like all these things. But the short time where it does happen in the book, I found incredibly frustrating to read, just like obnoxious. It's like just okay. And it translated into the movie in a way that was somehow more obnoxious and less like, because I had less of the supporting details of the world. I feel like that it didn't work for me in a way that it already didn't work for me in the book. I don't know. Didn't like any of that.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think having it be a little bit more drawn out and having the extra detail leading up to that scene is helpful.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is that we eventually, I guess it's just never satisfying in either medium for me, because eventually we get to the point where it's like, okay, we find out that, okay, he's a wolf. Jacob's a wolf, and this is a secret that he can't tell. He's bound by some oath of their tribe or whatever, so he can't tell her. And there's also some layer to it of he also has like heightened like anger responses to things because of this sort of,
I was calling it the wolfening.
His wolf DNA blood, his wolf blood or
makes
whatever.
Him angry.
Makes him angrier. Like he has a shorter fuse and that sort of thing. But this particular scene in both the movie and the book where she goes to confront him and he's just an outright jerk, I didn't get why. Like I don't understand even in the context of the story where, okay, you have a shorter fuse. It would be one thing if like she comes over to talk to him and he's like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, I haven't talked to you recently. I can't tell you what's going on. And she's like badgering him and then he freaks out on her. That would make sense. You know what I mean? And then he's like, look, fuck you, get out of here. Like, I can't tell, like if it built from something, but she shows up and he's like, what are you doing here? And it's like, what is I just didn't get I didn't get what the meta narrative of, or like what, not the meta narrative. I didn't get what like the subtext of what that scene was supposed to be. Like what in real life is this supposed to be echoing? Just like the moodiness of like teenagers, I guess. It like really, like, is that what it is? Maybe.
I think part of it, my theory, I think Stephenie Meyer at some level wanted it to mirror how Edward treated her.
Right.
The go on get,
right,
as you called it in a later segment.
Yeah.
Also, I kind of think that she maybe only knows how to write one type of intriguing male love interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the thing, because it makes sense to me with Edward. Yeah. And in the beginning of the book, when he kicks her out and is like, get out of here, and does the like, you're not good for me, all that sort of stuff, and breaks up and does the it's not me, it's you, so that she'll actually leave thing. I get that. But in this situation with Jacob, again, it just doesn't, and that also jives with Edward kind of just in general. Like he's a colder person, and like so it doesn't feel out of like literally, it doesn't feel out of character, even though it is out of character to an extent. He is like lying and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think the thing with Jacob is it to me it would have made more sense if. Because she's also not done anything that like means that he can't be around her. He's okay. He can go be part of this pack. Why does that mean he can't talk to her anymore? Like, I think
we're supposed to surmise from meeting Emily later that he feels like it's not safe for her to be around him.
Okay.
Which, again,
I guess that's
only one type of intriguing male love interest.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. But to me, it's just, it felt so incongruous with Jacob that I didn't even, and maybe that does work in that regard. The fact that his in the movie, that scene where he's yelling at her felt so poorly acted, maybe it is intentional, potentially, because he is putting on like a show. It just, to me, it didn't feel. Whereas Edwards was obviously an act for the benefit of getting her to leave, that didn't necessarily feel like that's what, to me, and maybe I just am dumb, but when I read that scene between Jacob and Bella the first time, didn't remotely read it as him like trying to get her not to hang out because he's worried about their relationship together. To me, it just felt like he was just being like a jerk for no reason. Like, I don't know. It didn't add up to me for what in the same, like everything else, like Bella and Edward's relationship added up and what happened there, but theirs didn't. Jacob and Bella's, like that falling out scene just could have felt like we didn't lay enough groundwork to make that make sense to me, at least. I don't know. I also prefer in the book that the meadow, she does finally go to the meadow in the movie. Yeah. There's not the scene where they're trying to find it together, but she goes by herself eventually and finds it, and where she runs into Laurent. And in the movie, so the whole reason she's trying to find it in the book is that she thinks if she goes back there, it'll somehow make her feel better. Because it's this weird thing where she's like kind of trying to ride this fine line between, because she has this big hole in herself, that Edward left there, and if she thinks about Edward too much, it hurts a lot, but also like completely excising it is not an option. So she's trying to find this like weird equilibrium, and she thinks maybe going to the meadow will make her feel good without like triggering like her PTSD about their relationship, essentially.
Yeah.
And in the book, she gets to the meadow and it's exactly the same, but it holds none of the magic that it did for her the first time because Edward's not there. And in the movie, she gets to the meadow and everything's dead. And now I get, obviously, visually, and from a sort of symbolic storytelling point, why the movie made that decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of like, okay, yeah, he's gone. Oh, this thing. She gets there, and it's look, it's a shell of what of its former self. It doesn't hold the beauty it did before. But there was something actually I thought really subtle and nice about the book's version, where it's still the same meadow. It's still just as pretty, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that to me is much more interesting. It's a lot harder to get that across in a movie, like because we have to hear her. Because in the book, we literally just get Bella's thoughts, where she goes, "Oh, it's the same, but it's not the same." You can't do that. I mean, you could do it in the movie with the voiceover or whatever, but so I get why they changed it. I just like the book's version more.
There's a scene in both the book and the movie where Jake, after he's turned into a werewolf and they've had that falling out scene that we just discussed, he sneaks into Bella's room through her window and tries to get her to, he kind of like gives her some hints and like asks her to remember like this story that he told her to try to get her to figure it out on her own since he can't tell her.
I would put that scene slightly more, I put it in the movie Nailed It because he does the same thing, but I there's elements of that I would put in the better in the book that hold their conversation. I know you're talking about the part right before it, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
but the way that he gets into her room in the book, he kind of awkwardly gets in by like climbing the tree.
He climbs a tree and then he swings like on monkey bars. Like he's
and,
like on a
swings
branch
himself,
and he like
which I'm like, how big is your window?
Yeah.
But also in the movie, it was just so ridiculous looking. Like he does like supernatural parkour up into her bedroom.
Yeah, they were trying to
And I get what the movie's trying to do.
Just show off his, new athletic sort of
but
ability.
Also it looked stupid.
It looked I thought it looked okay. The thing is that I think the way the book did it would have looked silly, because in the way it's described in the book is he literally is like swinging on a branch and then swings himself through the window, and I think it might have looked a little equally as silly maybe, but like less graceful. So I get why they changed it. But
now I will say I liked that the movie opened that scene with an allusion to Romeo and Juliet, with her like leaning out the window and him standing down on the ground. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, because in the book he's already up in the tree when she opens the window.
Yeah,
that's how she notices him out there.
So we meet the character of Emily in both the book and the movie. Emily is Sam, the werewolf's fiance, and she has these scars on her face from this one time that Sam lost control in his werewolfness and like slashed her face.
Yeah. And
I thought her scars sounded way more gnarly in the book. the book describes it like her mouth is kind of twisted on one side and her eye is like twisted up.
Yeah. It's definitely more extensive in the book.
And the movie I thought went kind of subtle with it.
Yeah, she just has like 3 claw marks and it's a little, the skin's a little scarred and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely in the book her mouth on one side is like,
it sounds like
misshapen.
It sounds way more shocking to see for the first time in the book.
A thing that I thought was really strange that they didn't do in the movie, and I guess there's something to it. Because I could see going both ways with this. I was going to add this to better in the book, but I didn't because I feel of two minds about it. But in the book, it's described that Bella walks into the kitchen where she's in, and they have the same comment before where one of them says, "Don't stare." Mm-hmm. And then they get into the room, or they get into the kitchen, and Bella sees her and sees only half of her face, the unscarred half of her face, like from profile.
Yeah.
And has a thought about how beautiful she is and like why not stare because she's pretty or something. And then she turns around and Bella sees the other side of her face and it's like revealed and she's like, oh. And the movie doesn't really do that. The movie, she immediately turns to camera. Like as soon as Bella walks in, or as soon as we see her, she's already in motion moving the camera. Like we don't get a shot of it holding on one side where we're only seeing, her unscarred side of her face and then revealing. And I was like, that seems like a missed opportunity. But I also, like in terms of like a reveal type of thing, but I also thought it showed some restraint and sort of forward thinking to not make a reveal of somebody's scar. Like, do you know what I mean? It feels sort of like gross and like exploitative to be like, oh, look how pretty she is. Nah, she's not. She's a monster. You know what I mean? Like that sort of reveal that the book describes feels tactless and weird on like as I thought more about it. So I was like, I'm kind of glad the movie didn't do that. It would feel like it's a classic like horror movie thing, where you see the person who you only see one side and then it turns around and they're like, the Phantom of the Opera type thing or whatever. But I was like, okay. I don't know if that's why they made that choice or if they just didn't film it or something. But if that was the reason, I thought I was like, okay, that feels like a much more restrained, respectful way to approach that as opposed to just like making it a gag.
That's fair.
So the shirtless look and the jean shorts that all of the pack wear is exactly what is described in the book. Mm-hmm. But in the movie, it looks so goofy, and it's a style that has not aged well. In particular, Sam's, he has like mid-calf, like they're like very long jean shorts, and they're like cut off
short pants,
and they're cut off, like they're ripped off jeans, and it just looks, I don't know, it looks a little silly, like it looks. I don't know. It's something about it's that longer short. It's just I think if they were shorter, like they would look less silly. Like if they were, but even then, like the shirtless with just the jean shorts, it's. We'll get to this, but I think there's some weird like homophobic coding in all of this from Stephenie Meyer. I want to talk about that later. But yeah, it doesn't look good. It looks silly. Like it always kind of made me chuckle in the movie. And so I haven't better in the book because even though it's described in the book, I'm not actively seeing it. So I can just imagine like a more reasonable length short or something. Yeah.
And on the issue or on the subject of their clothes, though, I did always like that the book addressed the fact that their clothes just get shredded when they go wolf.
Yeah, I don't remember if the movie comments on that at all.
It doesn't, because there's that first scene where we see Paul and Jacob both transform, and then when they come back in, they're both wearing
Is it the same
their clothes again. I think so.
See, I thought Jacob was wearing different clothes in that scene, but I could be wrong. I thought he had different clothes than he had previously. But it's definitely never like explicitly commented
Which in
on.
the book explicitly comments on it.
They're talking about how they're running out of shirts or whatever. Yeah.
I thought the movie missed an opportunity because in the book there's this description of like describes them as like exploding into their werewolf form and then like bits of fabric just rain down.
Fall down.
And I thought the movie missed an opportunity there to have like bits of denim just like falling,
raining denim. It's raining denim. Yeah, I agree because the movie never does never explicitly makes a comment on it, and there seemed like there was kind of an easy joke there.
Yeah.
Like in a moment of, you could find a moment of levity for that, because the book does an okay job with it. And it is one of those things that's kind of fun and adds to the world of like, or at least it's one of those things that somebody would be like, well, what happens to their clothes? Like, yeah, it just rips off.
Yeah.
They gotta get new clothes.
I mean, they just shred.
And it is one of the reasons that they do run around shirtless.
Yeah,
And
so they're wasting fewer clothes.
They're only wasting old jeans shorts or whatever. Maybe that's why they're such ugly shorts. They're like only wearing their worst.
I mean, though, sure, but also they should just be wearing like cheap basketball shorts.
They really,
all the time.
yeah.
Jeans are expensive.
They really should just be wearing, yeah. Well, I think I do think that it's implied in the book, and the movie again never addresses this, that because the book definitely talks about how, like, because Paul loses his temper and accidentally becomes a wolf all the time, he's like going through his clothes too fast. So there is the implication in that normally when they're gonna turn into a wolf, they get naked
they all
first.
just strip down.
Yeah, they're like, all right, it's what they do. They go into a phone booth and they do the Superman thing and they take all their clothes off. But I do wonder, but it's just easier but the basketball shorts would be better instead of like jean shorts, because they can just whoop. No, what they need, this is a great joke. Why is this not in there? They need the LeBron rip away basketball pants.
Tear away pants. Yes.
With the buttons. And when they're going to turn into a wolf, they just throw them up in the air and then transform into a wolf.
Amazing.
That's got to be in one of the like terrible spoof movies that like vampires suck or whatever. But yeah, because I was like, that would be better is if they had that. And they would actually look better if they were just wearing like basketball pants or something instead of like terrible cut off jean shorts. Yeah. Ugh. Anyways.
So there's this plot point threaded through the first part of the book before we get to the werewolf reveal that there are hikers disappearing or turning up dead.
Yeah.
And
the movie does a bad job with this whole plot line.
Yeah. Right? And like some people have seen like this massive animal and they think there's like a huge bear on the loose.
Yeah.
And of course then it's revealed that it's actually the wolf pack. But Bella thinks that the werewolves are the ones who have been killing these people and kind of like confronts Jacob about it, and they have like this,
after she finds out Jacob is a wolf.
Yeah, she like confronts him about it, and they have this whole like conversation of misunderstanding.
Which I hated that conversation.
Yeah, it was
to be
horrible.
Fair. I was glad that wasn't in the book, but
all of it, the book and movie, that was all terrible.
But I am glad
communicate to each other.
In the book that at least happens quickly. It was one of the things I mentioned, that at least like she doesn't think he's around killing people for like chapters and chapters.
Yes.
It's like she thinks it and then immediately
they have like one conversation.
And I was like, thank God. I would have lost my mind if I had to go and spend chapter after chapter of her like trying to figure out what to do about Jacob murdering people. I'm like, ugh.
But this is so poorly set up in the movie. They do a terrible job of setting up that whole thread.
It feels like the scene before she finds out, she runs into the wolves, where she goes to the meadow and runs into the wolves. They have like one mention of a hiker where it's going missing or something. Whereas in the book, there's been like a half dozen or something. And
they do a good job with that in the first movie.
Yeah.
Of setting that up.
Yeah, because we have the recurring scenes of like people getting eaten. And it's surprised they didn't. Well, maybe it was already similar enough they didn't want to like completely copy everything that happened.
But anyway, it's so poorly set up that when we do get to the point of, they should have just taken this out and cut it out. When we do get to the point of Bella confronting Jacob and being like, well, why do you have to kill people? It feels like this really awkward shoehorned in. Like, and if I hadn't read the book, I'd be like, why does she think that?
Yeah. Yeah, we literally hadn't seen anybody be killed. We'd heard one person like mention it offhand. Like I think Harry mentioned it in the kitchen or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, we hadn't seen anything. We hadn't, because there's if you didn't read the book, you would be like, what? Why is he killing? Who's he killing? The only person we've seen him go after is Laurent. What? Yeah, like okay.
The movie, I don't recall that this was in the movie. If it was, I totally missed it.
I don't think it was.
In the book, Bella tells Jacob about the extra powers that some of the Cullens have, that Edward's mind reading analysis, future predictions, and Jasper's as well. Yeah,
emotion
manipulation
thing.
But she doesn't do that in the movie.
Yeah, I don't remember it if she does.
Yeah.
I don't think she does.
But then at the end, Jacob seems to know that Edward can read his thoughts.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, he
who
does.
knows?
Maybe she did tell him. I don't remember.
I don't remember
her telling
that
him.
happening. If she did, they did a bad job with it because neither of us remember it.
Yeah. This is another thing, and we have this particular scene. We have a lot to talk about in later sections because overall we liked what the movie did with Bella's cliff diving scene. But one of the things that I thought the movie kind of failed at, that the book did a much better job of, was explaining her motivations behind going up there in the first place. Mm-hmm. Is that in the movie, it just seems sort of like we get the implication that she's like alone. She talks about being lonely, because Jacob's out on patrol all the time, and when she's alone, she gets sad and blah blah blah, and then
she decides to go.
She goes up to the cliff, and it's almost left ambiguous to us as a viewer, as if maybe she is going there to like try to kill herself. Like, well, I think that's maybe what the movie's trying to do, is play like us as
but like, it ends
Edward
up
or whatever.
It ends up feeling like we go point A to point B to point G.
Yeah. She's like, I'm alone. When I'm alone, I get it's when it's the hardest. And then she goes up to the cliff. And then she jumps off, and you're like, what? And then afterwards, she's like, oh, I wasn't trying to kill myself. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess.
Weren't you?
Where in the book, it's very clear that like her and Jacob made plans to go jump off the cliff. And then Jacob has to leave.
He has to leave because they spot Victoria or they catch her scent or something like that.
So he's going to chase her.
And he's like, I'll be back, just stay here.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I'm going to go jump it off the cliff anyways.
Like, I'm going to go do it by myself.
And it is a similar motivation of still like she doesn't like being alone and she wants that thrill and to hear Edward. It's all similar things, but it's just the movie tries to leave us in the dark, and they do, but it doesn't.
It doesn't
add
do.
Much
Yeah, it
to,
doesn't
like,
do what they want it to do.
Yeah, to me, I'm like, and maybe it would to somebody who's never read the book, because maybe you would be like, oh wait, is she trying to kill herself? Like maybe it is, because we know that's not what's going on. So like maybe that like misdirection works for somebody who hasn't read the book,
maybe
potentially. Whereas for us, it wouldn't. I don't know. But I just thought the whole thing was a bit muddy and didn't. I don't know. I don't know if it added up the way they wanted it to. So another part that's left out of the movie is when they're on the way to Italy. And I think overall you're right. Cutting this down was a good call.
Yeah,
but
we spend a lot of time on a plane.
We spend there's a travel montage. It's the last third of the book is planes, trains, and automobiles. And but Alice and Bella are on their plane going to Italy, and on the way there, Alice basically says to Bella that she's been considering turning her into a vampire. She's like, I'm just going to do it. She's like, I think it's just be easier if I just turn you into a vampire. And Bella's like, yeah, do it. She goes, honestly, I think it's all gotten beyond ridiculous. I'm debating whether just to change you myself. And Bella's like, well, yeah. And then her next line, Alice says, did I scare you? I thought that's what you wanted. I do, I gasped. Oh, Alice, do it now. I could help you so much, and I wouldn't slow you down. Bite me. That scene's not in the movie, but I liked it. And it fueled my Alice Bella slash fic. So I enjoyed that scene in the book. But overall, we do spend a little too long.
Yeah, it's a lot of time.
Flying and driving and
flying on planes and having quiet conversations.
Yeah.
When they do get to Italy and Bella has to race across the square in Volterra, she stops Edward just in the nick of time, kind of.
And if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, the whole plot, we explained he was going to commit suicide, but the way he was going to do that is he's going to reveal himself in this crowded square so that he's shown to be a vampire, and then everybody would see him, and this would force the Volturi, who are like the high council of vampires, to execute him essentially for breaking their main rule.
Because you can't just kill yourself as a vampire.
Yeah, apparently not.
But the movie leaves out, I mean, they kind of hint at it-ish.
Yeah, they do leave it out.
But there's this whole moment where when she stops him, when he thinks that because she's there, that means that he's died and gone to some kind of heaven.
Afterlife, heaven or something. And there's like the brief moment where, and she has to convince him that that's not what's going on. And there's a hint at it in the movie. I didn't think that made any sense to me in the book. I was very confused at what was happening because and then I realized, oh, he thinks he's dead but I'm like, but why would he have, how would he have died? All that left me was questions on how he thinks the vampires kill other vampires who break the rules, because he walks out into the sun and then they immediately disintegrate him from afar. Like what how would he think he died in that moment is my question.
Know.
That was what was weird to me.
I don't know.
That was very confusing about that scene to me. He's like, he thinks he's dead. I'm like, but nothing happened to you. How would you be dead? Can they kill you with mind beams from, like, they're not there. They're not like standing there watching him. They're in their, Volturi building or whatever. Volturi office building, underground office building. And I just didn't understand. He's like, oh, I'm dead. And it's like, but nothing, what killed you? Nothing happened to you.
I agree. It's not logical, but also it makes sense for him to not be logical in that moment.
Sure, I guess, yeah. It's fair. I just was very confused by how he thought he had died. It's like, what killed you? I get why the movie added a fight scene at the end. So once she stops him from revealing himself, kind of. It's also kind of poorly described in the book. I could not tell how much he got into the sun.
Yeah.
I was like, it seems like he's a little in the sun, but nobody saw him maybe. I don't know, which is what happens in the book, is like he gets out or in the movie. He gets out in the sun, but like nobody sees him.
It's an action scene that's kind of difficult to parse in the book.
Yeah, because again, he's trying to walk into the sunlight and he's in like the shadow. And the movie, I think, does a good enough job of like making it translating, I think, what I thought happened, which is like he kind of gets into the sun a little, but nobody has chance to like turn around and see him.
And that is one of the places where
girl.
I think
maybe that little girl's gonna. Ooh, okay, never mind. Sorry.
It is one of the places where I think we need the benefit of a visual medium.
Yeah,
because it's hard to parse what's happening, and part of that is because it's difficult for us to orient ourselves in that space. Like, where exactly is he, and what exactly is he doing, and where,
like, what's the light situation? Because
like,
that's already
where is Bella, and how far away from him is she, and how many obstacles are there, and like all of it is just a little bit difficult to suss out.
It was similar to the car crash scene in the first one that had issue. Yeah, and the biggest thing for me is that because the rules of the sun are so kind of murky with vampires in general, not just in this, in terms of like direct sunlight versus indirect sun, you know what I mean? Like, I had my biggest issue with that scene in the book when I was reading it was like, okay, so he's in like a dark alley, they say, and he's walking towards where the sun's hitting, but like, at what point is he in the sun, quote unquote, versus, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know, the whole thing was just a little but the movie does an okay job of showing what happened. No, but I was gonna say is that I'll have to remember for a future one. It was not one of my predictions in this one, but a little girl in the movie does see him. She's not mentioned in the book, so probably not going to happen. But in the movie, a little girl does see him, but nobody else does. And I was like, what if that little girl commits her life to figuring out what the heck she saw that day? And she as she graduates, she grows up, she goes through high school, and she graduates and goes to college, but she goes to college in Italy. She becomes this like committed to like doing this research to figure out who the sparkling handsome man she saw in that square was. And then she stumbles across the secret of vampires, and she's like, holy shit, there's vampires.
I feel like Stephanie Meyer is gonna listen to our podcast.
It's like the Blade origin story.
We're gonna give her an idea for the next Twilight Saga book.
I'm just saying that little girl could be. That's like a little thing that you could, if you wanted to do a weird spin-off with or something.
She could have like a conspiracy wall, but it would be like in that one scene from Doctor Who where the guy has like pictures of him throughout history, she's got like pictures of Edward.
It's Edward,
like it's all of his yearbook photos.
Yeah, it's just like dozens and dozens of the yearbook photos and stuff. Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Oh, that's the thing. That's the series is a spin-off. It's like an X-Files style spin-off. It's just that little girl trying to crack the mystery of this ageless, sparkly man that she saw in a square when she was 8 years old, and it turns into what's that? What's the one that just came out on CW or whatever? The young girl detective.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The young girl detective that CW is making a show or made a show. It doesn't
Are you
matter.
talking about Nancy Drew?
Yes, like Nancy Drew, but like she's like, it's like no, that's like an episodic mystery. Never mind.
Gonna ignore the part where you didn't know Nancy Drew.
I did, but I just couldn't remember the name. But anyways, that would be a fun spin-off movie or series. It's like it has nothing to do with them at all. It's just like her trying to figure out what's going on. But anyway, so the whole point of this that we got sidetracked was that they're going, he doesn't quite reveal himself, but so they go in front of the Council of Vampires or whatever.
Of Vampires.
With Aro and Cassius and whatever the other guy's name is. And basically they're like, okay, well, Bella knows too much. We're going to have to kill her. Mm-hmm. And this is the same in the book and the movie. And they're like, how about we don't kill her? Instead, we're going to turn her. Alice is like, what if we turn her into a vampire? And they're like, oh, you're going to turn her into a vampire? And they're like, maybe. And Edward's like, no. I mean, maybe. And then basically they're like, sure, we'll turn her into a vampire. And they're like, we'll check back up, make sure you turn her into a vampire. That's what happens in the book. Mm-hmm. In the movie, same thing happens, except in the intervening part when they're like, we're gonna have to kill Edward, or we're gonna have to kill Bella. This leads to a big fight because they go to kill her, and Edward's like, no, and they have a fight. Yeah, I get it. I get why the fight's in there. This is a teen action. It's not an action movie, but like a teen drama summer blockbuster. Gotta have some action.
Oh, we need an action.
We need a fight scene here. So there's like a fight scene. It's fine, but it just doesn't add anything for me.
Like initially when that started, I was like, okay, cool, a little bit of action, but it went on far too long. I thought that if they had stopped with like him initially jumping to defend her and like the other guys slamming him down, I thought if it had stopped there, fine.
Yeah, because the thing that I didn't like about it is that Aro's character is so interesting. He's the best part of this book and this movie.
Yes.
He's so fascinating because you don't know what his deal is yet. And I loved that. I was like super into him. And I think it cheapens him a little bit. That what I liked in the book is that he's so fascinating. You don't know what his motivations are. Mm-hmm. And so when he's like, well, we got to kill her because she knows about vampires. So you're like, okay, that makes sense. But then they're like, immediately when they propose, like, oh no, I like that it never escalates to violence and that it's just him like sort of like bantering through this situation in his weird like, RO way. Like
he's like chaotic neutral personified. Yeah. Like he's just doing everything for the lulz. Yeah. As people used to say.
Right. And there's something about the way that it plays out in the book that and the movie's very similar. And I think Michael Sheen does a great job. We'll talk about it more. But I don't know, the fight scene detracted a little bit from what I thought was like his scene, like where he's the most interesting. And again, trying to figure out what his motivation is to take a break and watch Edward and this dude fight for like 45 seconds. I was like, just didn't care. I was like, whatever. Like, it's not interesting.
Well, the movie shows as they're leaving the Volturi's throne room. Yeah. The movie shows Heidi, who is another vampire, leading in a group of people to be their next meal. Yeah. Which is in the book. Mm-hmm. But the book mentions an old woman like clutching a rosary. Yeah. Which I thought was like a great gruesome detail.
It's really good because it explicitly lingers on Bella's. It basically, the book gives us a single person to identify with there, as opposed to like just a nameless, faceless group of people walking by. And Bella, like she seems to know something's wrong. Yeah, like this lady does, and nobody else does. They're all just like they're on a tour or something. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she knows and is panicking makes it much darker and like much more like intense than the movie ever gets it to be.
I so wish that detail would have made it into the movie. It's just this horrifying, gruesome little moment, and it does linger with Bella, and I think that is important in her character development.
Yeah, I agree, and it was surprising to me that they didn't have some similar, even if it was something different. I mean, the closest we get is that we see there are some kids in the group, but again, we don't see anybody's face. They just walk past.
Yeah.
We don't get it. We don't get to identify, and which is a thing that it seems like movie making 101, which, and it's really surprising, is that if you're going to do that, you have to give us one person to latch onto versus just like
a big group of people.
Okay, we don't care. Like, give us a story. Give us somebody.
When they get back from Italy, Edward and Jacob have a confrontation. They almost fight.
Epilogue.
Yeah.
In the book, yeah. And the movie,
Jacob turns into a werewolf. They almost
yeah
come to blows. I hated that.
Yeah, I really preferred it in the book. The same scene happens in the book and the movie.
Yeah.
It's the epilogue in the book, and they talk to each other and they kind of have a conversation. And a lot of it's similar, but they add some more to it in the movie. Some stuff that I really didn't like. In particular, the one thing I didn't like is that Bella walks up to Jacob and basically says directly to him, she goes, "It was always going to be Edward," or something. It just feels weirdly cold and mean, like because she doesn't say that in the book, and she never makes any sort of weird, like, I don't know. It just felt like, why did she need to like say that to him? I don't know. It just felt strange to me. That they decided to add that line in the movie. But the whole scene, they actually like go to start fighting, like you said, in the movie. Whereas in the book, Jacob starts to get upset and then they leave. And like Edward like kind of like puts Bella behind him because he thinks like Jacob's going to transform, but he doesn't. Like as they're leaving, he like transforms and runs off. But yeah, I just think that, I don't know. There was one particular change that I really liked at the end that we'll talk about shortly, but that in general, I thought that epilogue, that scene didn't, I don't know, wasn't as good in the movie.
And another thing that the movie skipped over, this happens before the epilogue, I just have it in the wrong place in our notes, is the fact that Edward and Bella actually fucking communicate with each other at the end of the book and like talk about their feelings. Like, imagine.
Yeah.
Communication.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow. Yeah. Concept.
There's a little bit of it in the movie, but not nearly as much.
Like, and it's not riveting to read.
No.
And it probably drags on a little too long in the book. But fuck, man.
Yeah.
Communication.
You talking about where they're in her bedroom and she's talking about...
There's a little bit of it then, and there's a little bit of it when they're still, like, at the Volturi, when they're, like, in the waiting room. And a little bit on the plane, too, I guess. Just where they have a couple different conversations where Bella comes to understand how Edward feels about her.
Yeah.
And Edward comes to understand the depth of her feelings for him.
Yes.
So that now, like, okay, fuck, finally, we're on the same page here at last.
That's after the plane, because there's this whole thing, what I'll talk about in the next segment. There's this weird dynamic of their relationship while they're still in Italy and on the whole plane back that I thought was really dumb that the movie does away with, which we'll talk about. Because they kind of do it in the movie. They do it in a different place, but we'll get to it here in a second. So that was it for Better in the Book. Handful of things, but we got a lot more to talk about in Better in the Movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
The movie opens up on a tease of the courtyard scene from the end, which I thought was like the big plaza scene where she's running. We start with her running through, and it's in this very clearly like old city, and there's like these red we don't, as a movie viewer, you're like, what is going on here? Obviously, as a book reader, we knew what that was. But I think it's a fun tease to the end where she's running clearly for something. And then I thought it was also a clever cut that it then transitions. She runs through the crowd and passes through some people, and then it cuts to her passing out, coming out of these trees into the meadow. And that actually launches into where the book starts, which is with her dream about getting old. Yeah. Like her dream about becoming an old lady. And I thought that was a clever choice, clever cut together to give us a little bit of a flash forward to the end, but then also combine it with where the book actually starts in sort of a clever way, and still giving us that meadow scene. I thought it was interesting. I thought it did a good job. And I also thought it was like in my movies nails it segment is the meadow scene with Edward where she sees herself as an old lady. Yeah. And she thinks it's her grandma at first, but then realizes as the person, they even had that little detail where like she has her arm around Edward, and then her grandma, she thinks, has like her arm out to the side and she doesn't know why. Figure it out, and then realizes that she's not seeing Edward in this reflection of herself or whatever. I thought that was very well done and very similar to the book, which was an okay scene in the book as well. I also love in the movie that we don't get your classic "Let me catch you up" first chapter of a sequel, which we talked about a lot in the Harry Potter ones, where it's like, let me give you a quick recap, and we get a very similar thing in the first chapter of this one, where it's trying to figure out a way to work in all the relevant details from the previous book and all the like world building that you did in the previous book, try to slam that all into one chapter. And it sounds like such a nightmare. The reference I have here, Lindsay Ellis just tweeted about it like the other day. Her first book just came out and she's like working on the sequel for it. And she tweeted about how much of a pain it is to write that, to do that "Let me catch you up" first chapter of a sequel. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't sound, because it's no way to do it. There's almost no way to do it well. Like, it always comes across as just like, yep.
Do the Babysitter's Club method, and you just devote yourself to redescribing what everyone's wearing. But it's always different outfits, so it's fine.
Yeah.
But the outfits tell you about their characters, so it's great. You never read any Babysitter's Club books, so you don't know what I'm talking about.
I do not know what you're talking about.
Charlie makes a joke about Bella having a gray hair in the movie that I thought was kind of funny. And she's immediately like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. She's very much caught up in her, in growing older.
Yeah.
Which the movie does an okay job of, between the dream sequence and then that, and then her discussion with Edward later. I actually have that in the movie nail. We'll talk about it here in a second. But yeah, it's a fun little joke, and it's a good. It's still one of the better things that these movies do is capture her and Charlie's relationship pretty well, like their dynamic, and that actor who plays Charlie always does a really good job.
It felt kind of super random to me that Jacob just like shows up at Bella's school in the beginning. Like, I get that he's there to give her a birthday present or whatever, but it felt kind of like, why are you here?
Yeah.
But it was nice of the movie to remind us that Jacobs builds cars.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel like the book did a particularly good job of that. And he gives her a dream catcher, which is cliche, but kind of cute.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little like, ooh, all right. But it ends up working out. I mean, it's one of those things that you definitely feel like maybe on a second write of the book, Stephanie Meyer might have done, because nightmares become such a prominent aspect of what happens to Bella. Like, she suffers from nightmares constantly, so it is kind of like a clever like call forward, in a way to the events forthcoming in the story.
I liked that the movie showed them watching Romeo and Juliet during class.
Yeah.
In the book, her and Edward watch it at home together. I thought it made more sense for them to be watching it in class.
Yeah.
And I liked the like slow pan of all of the students like reactions to it.
Yeah. I also liked, and I think I had this in the movie nailed it, but it was a fun little detail that the movie included, and arguably is actually maybe more effective. They're different. They're very different. That Edward knows every word to it by memory. In the book, that happens by him as they're watching it. They're like cuddling on the couch, and he's like whispering all the lines in her ear, which is cute and romantic in its own way. But there is, I thought the way it's done in the movie is a little more dramatic and something about it is worked for me a lot, which is that the teacher like calls on him or something to like recite a part, and Edward just recites it without opening the book or whatever. Just like, and the camera just pushes in on him as he like does the whole thing. And I thought there was some fun drama to that. Like, he just knows all of Romeo and Juliet. So I thought that was fun too. I also thought it was a good idea, similar to how the first movie sets up the evil vampires hunting people throughout the course of the movie, which we don't get in the book other than mentions of it in the first book. We see the Volturi very early in this movie, and it's a flashback technically
of when Carlisle
was with them, because it was mentioned early, and this is a scene that was actually in the first book that they moved to this one, where when Bella goes to their house for her birthday party, Edward is like showing her Carlisle's office and talking about this painting of the Volturi and explaining the Volturi. That scene happens in the first book, and it wasn't in the first movie. But they do it in a shortened version in this one. But I thought it was clever of them to then transfer into us actually watching them. And this is when he explains the rules about vampires. And I thought that was also clever. I didn't think I have a note about it. I thought it was also a good change to move the explanation of there being rules and there being like this high order of vampires to the beginning of the story, as opposed to Alice explaining this on the plane on the way to Italy at the end, because that's when it happens in the book. She's like, oh yeah, there's a Volturi. They got, I mean, she knows who the Volturi are, but like, she's like, oh, and they got these rules. And although there's a funny line in the book where Bella goes, there are rules. That was funny, but I thought it made sense to move that to the front of the story here, and also just to see them and then see them execute a vampire. And see that Carlisle's kind of like, weirded out by it. All of that made a lot of sense to me. And the more Michael Sheen we get, the better. So
the movie makes the wise decision to cut Bella working at the sporting goods store with Mike.
Oh, thank God!
Doesn't matter to the story at all.
Other than that, we get a couple references to the people being killed by bears there, but you could do that other ways. I mean, the movie doesn't do it at all, but you could do it other ways. And we get less of Mike the incel, so that's great. Good Lord. Mike's the worst.
He really is.
He's worse than he was in the first one. He was already not good in the first one. They did a good job casting him, because the guy that plays Mike just looks like the worst.
I also thought the movie really upped the ante in Port Angeles by having her actually get on the bike with the strange guy. Yeah,
so she goes... at one point she goes to Port Angeles with Jessica to go see a movie, to kind of like prove to her dad, like, to mainly for a couple reasons. One, for herself, to kind of like distract herself, but also to like get her dad off her case about not doing anything. And when she gets there, she has this moment where she sees these guys outside a bar. This is what happens in the book, and she thinks it's the same guys from the first book, who Edward rescued her from. And in the book, she just walks up to them, and this is the first time she hears Edward's voice. Same thing that happens in the movie. But in the book, like I said, they're just standing outside a bar, and she just walks up to him and then gets close and then looks at him and realizes they're not them, and then just kind of walks away. And then that's how it ends. And like you said, in the movie, they changed that to them like sitting on some motorcycles, and she actually walks up and then gets on the motorcycle with the guy, and they ride off. And I thought this made perfect sense in like numerous different ways. One, Jessica's reaction. Jessica's really mad at her in the book for nothing, like because she walked 10 feet away to look at a bar or something. Like it seems like a weird overreaction.
It really does.
By Jessica to her, to Bella, just like kind of walking away and looking at something. I get that she's being kind of like strange, but still. Whereas this, when she gets on a motorcycle and drives off, Jessica's reaction makes perfect sense. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you just left me here? What are you doing? Like, and like you said, it ups the ante. Sort of, it's an even more sort of dramatic scene, but also it's a starting point for her like motorcycle, that subplot. Like it just made perfect sense. Like whoever came up with that idea was like that. We get a little bit of when she gets to the meadow and the wolves chase Laurent away. We get like a couple moments of them like fighting, which was cool, because this is one thing you mentioned while we were watching it, is that it looks a lot better than the previous movie. And we assumed the budget is probably like twice, if not more, because the first movie made so much money. I'm sure this one's budget was significantly higher, so they were able to put a lot more money into the CG and that sort of thing, which they also had to, because in the first one they didn't have wolves, they didn't have to do anything with that. They just
I'm so glad they got a bigger budget and better special effects before the werewolves.
The budget for this one was $50 million, which the budget for the first one, I believe I said, was like $18 million or something. It was something crazy small.
But this one just looks so much better.
Yeah. And now I know one of the few things I am aware of from later movies is that they don't look great. Some of the CG has not aged super well, but there's a lot more going. Oh, the budget for the first one was $37 million, and this one was $50. So it went up, but not a ton. But it went up. I mean, that's still, a 20-30% increase. I thought seeing a little bit of Laurent and the wolves kind of duking it out was interesting.
So after Bella figures out that Jacob is a werewolf and she goes to his house to confront him about it, but he's asleep, and she's like, maybe I'll wait till he wakes up.
Yeah.
But she goes outside, and in the movie, she sees the other boys, the rest of the pack, walking up. And she confronts them, starts yelling at them, and she ends up punching Paul, the one who notoriously loses his temper.
Yeah.
And he, of course, loses his temper and goes full wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jacob, like, comes leaping over her and turns into a werewolf mid-jump to defend her. And I really liked that change.
It makes perfect sense. So basically the difference here is that in the book, she figures it out. The exact same thing happens. She figures it out while she's asleep in a dream. She goes to talk to Jacob about it. He's asleep. And then she waits, and then he comes and talks to her, and they have a discussion. And then he's like, okay, let's go. She tells him some stuff about vampires and the Cullens and stuff. And he's like, we got to tell the other guys this. So he takes her to them, and then this confrontation happens. Whereas the movie kind of just pushes that together. And it also makes a lot of sense because it short circuits this weird thing where Jacob knows they're not going to be happy about her being there, but he brings her anyways. And then Paul just gets really mad that she's even there.
Yeah.
And then loses his mind. Whereas it makes perfect sense for Bella to see them and be upset. Even though she knows what's going on.
Yeah.
She still thinks, she doesn't know why or how, and she thinks maybe they're somehow forcing him because of his reaction and being like all weird about it. Like maybe they're somehow forcing him into this, and he does, so she confronts him about it. Like, what do you do? Like, what did you do to him? That sort of thing. Because, maybe in her mind, maybe it's like a vampire thing, like where they bit him or something, And so she confronts him, and it makes perfect sense that then, it's just the way the movie does it is so much smarter than what the book does. But we still get the exact same scene too, where Jacob, because it's described identically in the book, where Jacob leaps over her and turns into a wolf in midair, and then they fight, and we get to see the fight, and it plays out really pretty much exactly the same. But it is a very subtle change that is very obvious and was a good one.
Another place where I thought the movie made some smart choices was the way that the wolves chasing Victoria and then Bella seeing Victoria in the water converge.
Oh yeah, we talked about this for like 10 minutes while we were watching.
Yeah, we had to pause the movie and talk about it. So Bella's gonna go cliff diving with Jacob, and he has to go chase Victoria. So they're chasing her. She decides to dive into the water and then thinks she sees like fire in the water, but it turns out that it was actually Victoria, which the same thing happens.
Yeah.
The same sequence of events happens in the book and the movie, but the way that the movie does it is so much clearer.
It's so much clearer what's going on, and it ties it all together in a way that makes sense, because I did not gather. And maybe I couple things. One, I will admit that when I got to the middle part of this book, it was tough sledding for me. It took some trudging to get through. But I did not gather that those events necessarily all locked together in the way that they very clearly do in the movie.
I know, because we had a very frustrating for me
it was
conversation.
frustrating for me too, because I was like, well, wait, what? Yeah, no, it was frustrating for me as well, because I did not realize. I thought it was I just didn't put those pieces together for whatever reason. I did not realize that when she saw Victoria in the water, and I think part of it was that there's this weird, because Stephenie Meyer does this thing where she describes what Bella saw as fire at first.
Yeah.
And so that also, and then eventually Bella realizes, I didn't see fire. It was Victoria's hair.
Yeah.
Which doesn't even really make sense to me, other than she has red hair, but it looks like she says it like a flash of fire. Was it? Again, I have so much immense problem with how Stephenie Meyer describes things in action scenes that I just have a hard time understanding.
Not one of her strong suits.
I have a hard time understanding what I'm supposed to be getting out of it at times. And so the fire thing, I didn't put it together necessarily At first, I was like, okay, maybe that's some sort of symbolism thing, or that's going to be a thing for a later story. Like, I initially, when did the fire thing, I was like, oh, okay, I'll put a pin in that. I'll remember that for book 4. That's going to be something. Like, that's going to be something important that comes back. And then it's just like, oh, no, it was Victoria's hair. And then by that time, I was far enough removed from the events of that moment where she jumps off the cliff that I didn't remember that lined up with Victoria and Edward, or with Jacob chasing Victoria.
Yeah.
I think is what it was, is by the time I put together, oh, that's Victoria, I had forgotten that Jacob left that morning to chase Victoria. So it didn't all line up to me.
He leaves to chase Victoria, and then he tells her later on that they lost her when she jumped into the water.
Yeah. All those
which events, is where Bella sees her. Yes. So it all lines up.
But it's all dropped in different...
the way that it's described in the book is not obvious that it lines up.
At least it wasn't to me, and maybe I'm just dumb, but I think, like I said, I think the problem is that it was so it
was very piecemealed out.
And from different parts, and it just never added up to me, whereas the movie does this parallel action editing that works very well, where it's Victoria running, and then Bella running, and then jumping off the cliff, and it all adds up. And they also do make it a really clever change of just explicitly tying, which we don't think this is even remotely implied in the book.
I don't think so.
Of explicitly tying Harry's heart attack to Victoria.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't know, he just had a heart attack. He just has a heart attack
in the book, and in the movie they tie it to he actually encounters her. In the woods.
They're out looking for the wolf or the wolves or whatever.
Yeah.
Him and Charlie are hunting for the wolves, and then Victoria comes across him and attacks him, and Jacob saves him, but he ends up having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And I thought that was clever because, again, maybe that's the implication in the book, but if it is, that she did not do a good job of concretely tying that.
I agree. But I also thought the way that it looked when the wolves were chasing her was really cool.
Yeah.
We had the shot with the bird, where it looks like it's flying backwards. And that's honestly how I prefer super speed to be shown, where they look normal and everything else is just slow.
It is.
Rather than having them being sped up. I just think it looks better.
It can. You can do both. This one, the super speed looks way better in general. When they do, in the fight scene at the end in the Volturi, throne room where they, turn into, a blur. It's almost like the flat, they turn into, a blur of, shapes. And then, that to me looks better than far better than, the stuff they did in the first one. Way better than
what the first movie does.
Yeah.
I also thought the moment when... So Jacob, as a werewolf, is chasing Victoria, and she dives off the cliff into the water, which is where he loses her. And then he turns around and stamps his paw on the ground. I thought that was cute.
Yeah. So in that moment, also, this is where Bella jumps off the cliff. And as she falls in the water, it's a slight change, but interesting. She comes up and it's fine originally. Then she gets hit by a wave because there's a storm blowing in. And it slams her against a rock, and she gets out of it. And it's similar in the book. In the book, she never comes up and is like, "Woohoo, I'm fine." She just is drowning the whole time and gets slammed into a rock. And in the movie, they do this thing that mirrors what's going on in the book, where Bella thinks she's dying in the book. She's like, "I'm drowning, I'm dying. This isn't so bad. At least it's over." And she has a similar kind of experience in the movie, but the movie explicitly does this kind of trippy, fun thing where she's drifting through the water, and then Edward appears next to her, and then as she's she thinks she's dying, and then she gets pulled out of the water, and the shot of her getting pulled out, she her hand reaches for Edward, and her hand dissolves him. It's and there's some kind of trippy, fun music playing. I thought that scene worked pretty well to capture a similar sort of feel of that acceptance in that moment, and this isn't so bad type of thing. And I thought it was a pretty visually interesting and kind of clever way to do that. And I liked the moment where she does get saved. I thought all that worked really well.
Yeah.
And again, Edward being there with her in the water isn't something from the book.
And I thought the visual of Jacob literally pulling her away from Edward it's obvious, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it works well.
So later on, when Alice shows up, she thinks that Edward doesn't know that Bella might be dead.
Alice
Does, yeah. Because Alice came because she saw Bella jump off the cliff.
Yeah.
So she came to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
And she...
explicitly to, like, help Charlie if she did kill herself.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
And she thinks that Edward does not know about this, but come to find out that Rosalie has told him.
Yeah.
That's what happens in the book. And then they get a phone call. Jacob answers the phone, and he just says, the person asks for Charlie, and Jacob says, like, he's at the funeral. He's arranging a funeral. Yeah. And then in the book, we just find out, I think through Alice, like through her visions, that was Edward on the phone. But in the movie, it actually cuts to Edward, like with his, like, and he like crushes his cell phone. And it's kind of like melodramatic, but I liked it. I thought it was a more interesting way to reveal that it was actually him on the phone.
Yeah. It also does give us it also kind of covers a quote unquote plot hole, for lack of a better term, because, well, what the book does is that, doesn't he think it's Carlisle? Doesn't Jacob think it's Carlisle?
Yeah. I think the implication was that Edwards tells him that it's Carlisle on the phone.
Yeah. And then Alice comes down and goes, "Oh no." Yeah. It's Edward's gonna
He's gonna go provoke the Volturi.
And because he thinks you're dead, and they're like, "Well, how does he know?" And they're like, "Oh, because and then he's like, "Oh, it was him on the phone." And there's like the thing of like, well, you could try calling back that phone, like you could star 69 it, you know. Like, I know that they're on like a normal phone, but star 69 or whatever is a thing. But he crushes the phone, so it is a little over dramatic and silly. But
again, so glad we sped up the process of Alice and Bella getting to Italy. Didn't need all that plane time.
Yeah,
we did get a nice product placement.
For Virgin
in the movie,
Airlines,
though, yeah.
What's your perfect product placement for this book series? Are you right? You think Stephanie Meyer explicitly asked?
She insisted on Virgin Airlines.
Yeah. And then we get Michael Sheen, who's the best part of this movie, and I have a feeling going to be the best part of all these movies going forward.
I actually put his performance under the movie nailed it.
True. I will agree. He does nail it because he's written very similarly in the book. I'm not saying...
I think it's splitting hairs.
Yes.
But...
he does nail, because he is a very similar sort of zany, interesting... Yeah. Like you said, chaotic neutral.
He's chaotic neutral to where you're like, what's your deal?
What's your deal? Why,
what are you motivated by?
What are you playing
because
at
I
here?
Can't tell.
Yeah. What are you playing at here? Definitely. And I loved that. And it does come from the book. So in that regard, it is the movie nailed it. But I think Michael Sheen just takes it to another level, and it's just something about him that is just so fun. And he's a very interesting guy. I've listened to him a lot. He's on like podcasts. He'll like go be on podcasts and stuff. We might be able to get him on this podcast. Probably not.
We should ask him though.
But he's too busy being in Good Omens now. He's the other half with David Tennant. But yeah, he's been on like Doug Loves Movies and stuff and talked about he'll talk at length about like his performance in these movies. Like he's very knows what he was doing. He was very into it. He seems like a very cool dude, at least from the stuff I've seen of him. And I love his performance in this movie so much, and I'm super looking forward to more of him going forward. I mentioned it earlier, but this is a huge change for me that really helped the movie. There's this weird dynamic in the book after Bella saves Edward and stops him from showing himself, and then the whole thing with the Volturi and all that stuff. They don't ever take any time to talk in the book. They never discuss anything at this point. And this whole time, from when she meets up with Edward again, all the way on the flight back, and all the way through like a half a scene then, like in her room or something, they have this whole dynamic where Bella thinks he is still gonna leave. Yeah. And she doesn't understand that he was lying to her about not loving her at the beginning when he told her to leave. And I found it super infuriating. And this is what you're talking about, that she didn't get that he was doing the go on get routine, which is, you know, like in not Old Yeller, but whatever, pick a animal movie, you know, where the kid has their parents make them get rid of the dog and they're like, get out of here, I don't love you anymore, you know, as they're sobbing or whatever. It was insane to me that she, at this point, she's with Edward for hours, days, and somehow they don't have this discussion. It's not addressed that he was saying that to save her, to protect her, whatever. And then they finally have that conversation like days later.
Yeah.
And I hated that dynamic because she's like talking about how like she doesn't sleep the entire plane ride because she's like she wants every possible second. She's worried he's just gonna up and leave again because he doesn't love her. And everything about that in the book, I was like, this is so dumb. This is so dumb.
I agree with you that is too drawn out and it gets to a place of being annoying. Having been an insecure teenage girl, totally get why she thinks that he's not actually as into her as she is into him.
That's fair.
I get it.
That's fair. That is definitely, and I don't disagree with that. That is definitely a major aspect of her character thing. It's something I had a note about wanting to discuss. Like, what is her arc? I mean, we can talk about it now. I had it in my odds and ends, but might as well just do it now. And we can't, don't tell me what her arc is, but I really am fascinated to see what Bella's like quote unquote arc is because she's such a mess. And not like, oh, that's fine. People can be a mess, but like she's so, I don't know what I'm really fascinated to see what Stephenie Meyer's like arc for her is. Like, what is I'm trying to suss out what the planned, like, to me in these first two books, Bella is such a broken and flawed character in terms of being so insecure, so dependent, so codependent with Edward in such an unhealthy way. Their relationship is the epitome of unhealthy. Like, it's just awful. Like, she's completely codependent. He is too, but at least we're not in his head, so we don't get as much of it.
Here's looking forward to Midnight Sun.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, but it is obvious because he tells her in the end of this one, like, when he left her, like he didn't do anything. He's like, I was the worst person to be around. He was like, I was a nightmare. So like, clearly he also is codependent, but their relationship in that regard is so, and like all she talks about is, how she's literally like catatonic for months.
Yeah. When
Edward leaves her, and it's just so unhealthy. But I don't know. And she has this line in the end of this one where she goes, when she's on the plane, about wanting to become a vampire. She's like, maybe if I become a vampire, I'll be beautiful and strong enough that he'll actually love me, or something like that. And so my question is, does Stephenie Meyer see these problems with Bella? And are they going to be addressed in any way? Because from what I know, I'm betting still, and it's slightly been spoiled by the stupid commercials, but Bella becomes a vampire at some point. And I mean, and it was obvious at the end of this book and this movie. I mean, they say, like, they all vote and they're all like, yeah, you're going to become a vampire. So I was under the assumption it's going to happen. Is that her arc, that she just becomes a vampire? That doesn't, how does that fix anything with her? And again, I'm not asking you to answer these questions. I'm putting these out there so that I can consider them going forward, and we can talk about whether or not her becoming a vampire is a good thing or makes any sense, or how that helps fix her flaws as a human at all, or makes her less dependent. Is it literally just, now that I have superpowers, I feel equal to you, and so we can be together because now we're both equally like eternal, undying vampires? Like, it's such a weird dynamic that she has set up that I mean, like, ideally what would make sense to me is that Bella somehow doesn't become a vampire and some sort of finds her own self-worth in a way, and actualizes her own self-worth apart from Edward. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think Edward's just going to turn into a vampire, and they're going to like make vampire babies. Like, I don't know. It's so problematic, their relationship. And I don't know how you rescue it in a way that makes any sense. And my guess is that she doesn't, but we'll see, I guess.
We shall see.
And speaking of, that was kind of my next note, is that their relationship is less awful in the movie.
Yeah.
It's less toxic. I think this is something Shelby mentioned in the first one, and it is. since we're not in Bella's head so much, it's still bad. We still like get montages of her screaming and crying and waking, you know, like just for months and months and months and months in a way that's beyond like what is healthy. But it is less toxic in there, and like she doesn't seem as like broken of a person when he's not around. I don't know. And they're not, we don't constantly hear about how incomplete she is as a human with him. I don't know. We do hear it. It just feels, we dwell on it so much in the book. It's so constant that it's just overwhelming, and the movie has less of it, so it feels better, I think.
And now,
the best part.
The best part of the whole entire movie.
Oh my God.
I want to give it to the movie just on this moment.
Literally this single moment.
Just for this single moment. If you can find the audio clip of this,
oh my goodness,
please cut it in. This was worth the price of admission.
It is. Yes.
So Bella and Edward go to the Cullens' house at the end of the book/movie. Well, at the end of the movie, because that's where this happens.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen in the book.
Yeah.
And they do a vote on whether or not to turn Bella into a vampire. And Bella is explaining what she wants, and Edward begins to interrupt her.
Yeah.
And Bella delivers. God bless Kristen Stewart.
Oh my goodness.
The delivery of this line, she just goes, "Shut up."
She says it in it's the most real. I can't put into words how perfect her delivery is in this moment.
The only thing that I can think of for it to be fair is to just vote.
So you don't know what you're talking about?
It's this perfect combination of exasperation, and it's so out of character for book Bella is the thing.
Yes.
It's literally like Kristen Stewart jumped into the movie as an audience member and was like, I'm doing this for all of you. Like,
I felt like in that moment, I felt the depth of Kristen Stewart's frustration with the entire thing.
Yes. It's because it makes no sense for Bella's character.
Yeah.
Like, Bella in the first two books never once has reacted to Edward in that way. Not even close.
No.
You know,
I almost wonder if she broke character there and they just left it in the movie.
I don't, because it is everything. It's exactly what you want her to say. And I will say that is that it's the best moment, not only because it's like a fun, like we laughed, both of us.
We paused the movie to
out
laugh.
loud for like 15, 20 seconds. But so apart from it being like this hilarious crowd pleasing moment, because we all want to tell Edward to shut up sometimes, it's also like if this were the starting point of an actual character beat moving forward for Bella, of her like sort of finding a new healthy like balance with Edward and boundaries and like you know that and standing up to him in a way, not that she necessarily needs to stand up to him because he's not like a, you know what I mean? He's not like overly domineering or weird or creepy necessarily, like in the book or the movie. Like they're both like enamored of each other in an unhealthy way, but like, you know, he's not like abusive. I don't think, like, at least from what we've seen, in a way, maybe abusive is not the right word, but like,
I think I find him controlling reading it as an adult. Yeah. I find him to be the type of character that does not take what she wants into account. And he's true. Controlling in that way.
That is true.
Like, he thinks he knows what's best.
Yes. I think it's funny is that I think it's different. I think that comes across less in the movie.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, it does.
Although also vice versa, because we did mention that in the first one in relation to the dance. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the book, he lets Jacob cut into his dance and it's just like goes and, you know, he's not like completely possessive. Whereas in the movie, he's like weirdly possessive. But apart from that one scene, he seems less like that in the movie than he does in the book. But I do think you're right. I do think, he is sort of overly controlling in a way that's unhealthy. But I think that's slightly motivated by, not slightly motivated, but it's complicated by her unhealthy attachment to him. But the attachment is unhealthy both ways. So I don't know. Their relationship is just a nightmare that shouldn't exist. Like they don't belong together at all. It's just completely unhealthy. It's just it like triggers things in me. Like it just makes me really uncomfortable reading their relationship at times and like how dependent they are. I do not like reading it sometimes. It's like really uncomfortable because I think that's really, not to get into a whole thing, but I think it's like super unhealthy to be that dependent. I think most people would agree, but like the sort of nature of their relationship and how obsessed they are and like it's the only thing going on in their lives is like each other is so weird to me. And like I get there's some romanticism to it at some degree, and I guess if this was an exploration of how on the surface that can appear romantic but at a deeper level that's incredibly unhealthy and disgusting,
right,
then
but
this would be
it's not
that really
an exploration of that.
But that I think is actually a really interesting exploration, is that because that is kind of like like the Romeo and Juliet idea is like if you look at it as a surface level of like, oh, this sweet their undying commitment and love for each other,
the passion, the romance.
But if you take even the slightest look at it, you're like, no, this is horrible.
They just met.
And then they both die because of it. And obviously Shakespeare was kind of going on that, but I don't think Stephenie Meyer necessarily gets that subtext. Regardless, that scene, that moment, it's just so good. I'll put it in. I already put it in. You already listened to it once, but here I'll put it in again. It's her. Yeah.
Oh, it's so perfect. It's so perfect. And then another good choice that the movie made was not having Edward freak out and destroy things after the family votes to turn Bella into a vampire.
Yes.
Woof.
That was another part where I was reading the book. I was like, Stephenie Meyer, what am I supposed to feel in this moment? Am I supposed to... This is awful. He's like a horrible person.
Yeah.
In the book, they take the vote and they all vote yes, except for like him and Rosalie or whatever. And Rosalie at least has a good reason. Like her reason is like, I'm a vampire. I wouldn't want you to be a vampire.
And her no vote is like, she knows she's outnumbered. It's really just like a symbolic.
Yeah, and like a warning
piece.
To some extent. Yeah. Like, hey, I wish somebody had voted no for me because this ain't a great existence or whatever. In her opinion. And so, you at least get hers. But like this whole time they all vote yes, and Edward's just like losing his mind and like screaming and breaking things in the other room. And I'm like, what? Stephenie Meyer, he's our like romantic good guy lead, right? Like, what are we? Oh my goodness. Whereas in the movie, he's just like upset. Like he just stands there looking like, pouting kind of, which
is really just his normal face.
Yeah, but that's at least a reasonable reaction because like the thing is I understand his motivation.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I don't get why he doesn't want her to be a vampire. There's a million good reasons for him to not want her to turn into a vampire because, there's... It's a fucking painful existence. You live forever. You have to watch all your loved ones die. What do we do about her dad? It was like her family. Should we just remove her from her family's life? Now he doesn't ever voice those reasons, but though you can imagine those as reasons, motivating reasons for why he wouldn't want her to be a vampire. So I can get him being upset that they're all like, okay. And so him being like upset about it and pouting, fine. Him breaking furniture in the other room is like,
red flag.
It's very clearly like that's an abuser thing. Like what? It's yeah. So good job, movie, just making him look upset and not like a psychopath.
There was one moment after Edward and Jacob's a werewolf, and they almost have their fight. It's after the part that you hated. Where she tells Jacob that it was always going to be Edward, and he but it's while he's a wolf and he like looking at her and starts to cry, and I was like, I also thought Jacob in general was less of a dick in the movie post the wolfening, he kind of becomes a dick in the book.
Yeah, a little bit.
He kind of becomes a jerk.
Does he? I thought he was like the same, except for those one handful of scenes where he is a jerk. But I could be wrong.
I mean, there are those scenes. He's also just a huge asshole to her about the Cullens after he finds out that they're vampires. True. There's also the scene at the very end in the epilogue where he purposefully brings over the motorcycles.
Yeah, that is true.
To get her in trouble.
Yeah.
Purposefully to get her grounded so that she can't see Edward.
I forgot about
that's a dick move.
That is a dick move.
That's a controller, abuser move.
No, and the worst thing about Jacob, because I did have a note about, it's in the next segment, we'll talk about then, but I think the worst thing about Jacob is his weird, like, I'll wait for you, I'll wait you out until you, like, until you love me thing. Yeah. Like that, and he's a teenager, so he's 16, so, like, you know, it can be forgiven to some extent that, like, falling for her and, like, oh, I'll wait for you. Oh, I know you don't love me, but maybe if I just stick around, like, it's much more, to me at least, understandable and forgiving for a 16-year-old to think like that than if he was, like, 25 or something.
Right.
But it is still, like, you know, don't do that. She doesn't like you, bro. Just move on. Or just be her friend, and then you can even think that, but don't say it to her. That's the weird, like, even if you're thinking, like, you know, maybe one day she'll like me. That's fine. You can think that, I think. I mean, it's still probably not healthy. You should probably try to just get along
you should probably, like, go do something else. And
right. But if you're going to still be friends, but explicitly, there's a next level of saying it to her and putting that, like, it's like this weird guilt trippy, like, thing on her is. And that's, like, the worst aspect of him. Because apart from that, Team Jacob all the way.
Like, for me, at the end of this book, if you stack me up, okay, it's got to be Edward or Jacob.
Yeah.
I'm still Team Jacob.
Yes.
If we open the field a little bit more, I'm Team Alice.
Yes. Yeah.
If we open the field even more, I'm Team Bella. Girl, get out of here.
Yeah. Just get out for it.
Just
fucking
get out of here. Go do something else.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong there. Like, just go to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Just go do something else. None of this is healthy. Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly in that order. You're right. Yeah. Yep.
But I did like that the movie ended on Edward asking Bella to marry him.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was a good, like, dramatic cliffhanger.
Yeah. I didn't see that coming, and I did right before it happened, but I'd forgotten. Because in the book, I think it's really poorly handled in the book.
It's kind of wedged in.
It's wedged in their bedroom in, like, a throwaway line, and that's intentionally, like, an offhand, like, he's like, oh, you'd have to marry me first, and she's like, did you just propose? And it's like, but there's, like, no pageantry to it intentionally, but it also, even though it's intentionally, like, not a big moment in the book, that still doesn't stop it from not being a big moment and thus robbing some of, like, the drama. Mm-hmm. Whereas the movie makes it not a big moment, like, they're just standing in the woods, you know, like, there's not, like, a big dramatic proposal, but it being the last moment of the book or of the movie makes it dramatic.
Yes.
And then her, like, you know, gasp. It's fun. It's a fun, like, cliffhanger moment. Mm-hmm. Because the book, he asked her and she's like, okay, I guess. Right? I don't even remember
she doesn't like marriage. So she, like, argues with him.
Yeah. They kind of argue about it and then, like, I don't know. The movie version is more fun. Mm-hmm. Which, if we're not having fun with these movies, what are we doing?
We got to have something.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk about what the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
We mentioned earlier, but 18-year-old Bella has an I'm old crisis at the beginning of this movie. And it was funny at first, or this book and movie. At first, I thought it was a little, you know, it's like she's 18. But obviously, there's multiple factors at play. The main one being of which her boyfriend is an ageless vampire who's perpetually 17 or whatever, or 18 or whatever. So... So that's a big part of it. But I also, then I thought about it, I was like, you know, I remember that was, I think, legitimately for me, and maybe I'm weird, but I think I was like 17 or 18 when I had maybe even 16. It was in that range, 16, 18, where I had like a legitimate crisis of mortality for like a few months.
I did not.
Okay.
I was really busy with other crises, though.
Fair enough. But that was also
I don't know. You guys will have to weigh in. I'm having a mortality crisis right now as we speak. So.
Oh, okay.
So maybe our listeners can weigh in, and we'll find out if Brian's just weird.
I definitely did when it was 16, 18. That was definitely informed somewhat by my atheism. I was never religious, and I think that played a role in it happening then in terms of like being old enough. Because even when I was younger, like I said, I don't think I've ever like really believed in God. Maybe when I was a little kid, but I don't remember. But I never really thought about it. And then I remember I was like, I don't know, probably 16 or 17. And I remember there was like a month or two long period where like I really dealt with like some existential like dread about like mortality type stuff. And I kind of got over it eventually. And reading and stuff helped. And I think that was the Mark Twain quote that helped the most explicitly. I was dead for billions of years before I was born. It didn't bother me in the slightest, or something like that, which was, I think, the single most helpful line of philosophy that I've ever read on the topic. But yeah, so it did actually track for me. At first, I was a little like, I chuckled at it, but then I was like, oh no, that was kind of when I dealt with the like getting older type of that thing. Yeah. Anyways, the paper cut scene is identical.
Yes.
Like identical. Give the presents. She opens all the same presents. We talked about the radio and stuff. And then cutting it, and then Edward throwing her through the wall.
Making it 1,000,000 times worse by throwing her through the wall.
Yeah, through a coffee table, I guess that's what it is.
In the book, he throws her into, which I didn't notice if the same set piece was there in the movie. They have like a stack of crystal plates by the birthday cake. Yeah, and when I was reading it, I was like, why do they have a stack of plates? They literally only need one plate.
Yeah.
They're just there so she can slice herself open on them.
Yeah.
The whole thing was a setup.
Yeah, I don't know if the plates are there, because she slams against it. It's like a side table that is like glass. Yeah. And there's like a painting too that she hits or something.
There's like an absurd amount of glass in this vampire house.
Yeah. But it is, and then the stitching up scene and everything, and him burning the blood and stuff, all plays out identically.
Actually, while we're here, can we talk real quick?
Oh, we almost forgot to mention this.
Can we talk real quick about how Bella doesn't know what iodine is?
She has no idea what iodine is.
She doesn't know what iodine is.
We don't know if it's Bella or Stephanie Meyer that doesn't know what iodine is.
And it's so weird because let me see if I can find this in the book, because she spends like sentences. So she slices her arm open on the totally unnecessary stack of glass plates.
Yep.
And then Carlisle is stitching her up. And I'm going to read from the book here. He wiped an oversized Q-tip, dripping with some syrup-colored liquid, thoroughly across the operation site. The smell was strange. It made my head spin. The syrup stained my skin. Clearly iodine.
Clearly iodine.
From a craft perspective, why are we spending sentences on this? It doesn't inform on the characters or the situation. It doesn't advance the plot. Why, Stephanie Meyer, do you not know what iodine is? Does she not know?
Did she see it in a movie one time and was like, I'll just describe what was happening? Or, because this was, I thought that, but then I mentioned this to you, because I read that, I was like, you mean iodine? Just say iodine.
Yeah.
But then I was like, that made me question, which is even a note to your point about, like, the craft of writing, because that made me question, is this some weird vampire salve that, like, Carlisle knows? You know what I mean? Like, is this some
Clearly
weird Carlisle
iodine,
invention?
though.
Well, yeah, but because you didn't say iodine and described it as some weird, mysterious, brown, syrupy liquid, I was like, this is something else. This is some vampire medicine.
But here's my other question. We know, canonically, that Bella goes to the ER a lot. She injures herself all the time. How does this bitch not know what iodine is?
I don't know.
She should be an old pro.
I don't know.
At getting stitches.
That's why my thought is that it's not. It's some fancy vampire salve, whatever it is.
Why doesn't she know what iodine is?
Oh, it's fucking wild.
I mean, does Stephanie Meyer have a Twitter? I'm going to tweet Stephanie Meyer.
Do you know what iodine is? Did you mean iodine, or is it some fancy Carlisle-developed vampire medicine? Or is it just iodine? Why didn't you write iodine?
Okay, I just really needed to get that off my chest.
No,
I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I read those lines 2 weeks ago.
So eventually then Edward does break up with her, and I thought that scene was pretty much captured. They cut a lot of dialogue. It's a lot longer scene in the book, but the essence of that scene where Edward breaks up with her, I thought the movie captured really well. Explicitly, the thing that stuck out to me was that Edward's, Robert Pattinson's performance, I thought he did a really good job. Maybe he poured out because he knew he wasn't in this movie. Most of it, he like really leaned into this scene, really tried, because he's a good actor. They're both good actors, but his performance in the scene, I thought he did a really good job of portraying, of it coming across that he was, as he was breaking up with her, that this was painful for him to do, and that he didn't want to, without it being like super obvious and like. You know, like it didn't play like corny or like
he played it a good kind of a
subtle version of like him doing this was painful for him, but he had to do it. Yeah, I thought he did good. And Kristen Stewart was fine, but she mostly just hyperventilated. Like that was like her acting choice, which, you know, works. I think Kristen Stewart's main acting choice in this movie, I don't know if it was her or the director or whoever, and it's not a thing mentioned in the book, but if you've noticed this, she constantly, no, it is kind of mentioned, but she talks in the movie, she always has like one hand, whenever she's upset, she has like one hand over her stomach, kind of how somebody would act like an ulcer. She does that like in the movie constantly, like when she's like
Isn't
upset.
that a nod to, because in the book they say she like, it looks like she's trying to hold herself together.
That's the difference, is that in the book I read what she was doing all the time as like
a hug,
as like hugging herself, almost like
yeah,
wrapping
so did
her
I.
arms around herself, like, and like almost like you were cold or something. That was how I read it, whereas in the movie it's more of like oh, my tummy. It's like it looks like she has like bad gas. She's like, oh god. Like it's a slight difference. But anyways.
I thought the movie did a good job with the months passing.
Oh, I thought that was really great.
Yeah. I would argue that I don't know if the movie needed to show the names of the months. I thought they could have conveyed it all visually just fine. But I thought it was a good nod to the time passage gag as it appears in the book.
Because I actually that little gag took me by surprise in the book, and I was like, oh, that's clever. I like that. Because so if you haven't read the book, what happens is that after Edward breaks up with her, that chapter ends, and she like falls asleep in her bed or something, or like is like laying in her bedroom, and then the next page just has one word on it. It says October, and then you turn the page, and then it says November, and then you turn the page, it says December, January. And then chapter 4 starts, and it says waking up, and that's where that next chapter starts. And I thought that little gag for the time passage thing, I'm sure that's been done in other things. I'd never seen it before. And I thought it was clever. And I was wondering how the movie was going to do that. And I thought they did a good job. And I think that putting the words on the screen was just a nod to that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure I could see, because I thought it was clever, and I'm sure that like, that's like I could see when I was a teenager reading this, that being like a very, hitting me. You know what I mean?
I remember that hitting me in some kind of way.
That's what I mean. I remember I could imagine that really, because it kind of hit me, and I was like, oh, that's a clever little thing. And so I could see if I was young, I'd be like, oh shit, like that would really hit me. And so I think them keeping the words up, the months up on screen was just a sort of a
a nod to
that exact scene. But yeah, the camera spinning and all that was really cool. I thought it was a very clever way to do that. So I mentioned it earlier, but we got to talk about it. The weird, in my opinion, potentially homophobic subtext of the pack, the gang. Mm-hmm. There's Jacob's reaction to them and his disdain for them before he joins their group is read to me when I was reading the book as potentially like this weird veiled like homophobia, like gay, because they're all these shirtless, strong dudes hanging out together. Mm-hmm. And Jacob like he doesn't want to join them. He talks about, oh no, they're weird. I don't know what their deal is. Like he can't even describe what it is he doesn't like about them. Mm-hmm. He's just like weirded out by them, and like they just, you know, they like recruited his friend, like Embry or whatever, or is it the other one? It's Embry, right?
I think it's Embry first, yeah.
And like they like recruited Embry, and then he lost Embry to them, and it just felt like this weird allusion to like like a gay panic type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the movie actually takes it a step further in a way. I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but eventually after he does become a wolf or whatever, he's talking to Bella on the beach, and this line is not in the book from my memory. But it's in the movie and it stuck out to me. He says, Bella's asked him about being a wolf or something, or if he wants to do it or whatever. And he says, it's not a lifestyle choice. I was born this way. I can't help it.
Yeah.
And that language feels
is very,
yeah.
Very explicitly related to,
Yeah. Born this way, lifestyle choice.
Yeah. I didn't get that read from the book, but I fully support your read of it.
Well,
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I say homophobic, but it turns out that they're not bad. Like they're not,
right.
Like it ultimately it turns out, but they're also not gay. They're not coded. They are no longer coded queer after
right.
After he joins up with them and this conversation, they no longer read other than like, being shirtless, buff dude, like sort of stereotypically, but they don't like, there's no continuing like sort of tension in that, in regards to that. And none of them, at least as far as we know so far, none of them are gay. Sam is seemingly in a straight relationship or whatever. But something about it, I don't know. And again, this is one of those elements though, that like, if that was the point, I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of it. Because he joins up with them, and then it's not that big a deal. Like they're cool. Maybe that's the point. Like maybe it is like a vague like.
I don't know if that's something Stephanie Meyer could write, but
I know, and that's the thing that's weird to me about it is that it seems, I don't know, it seems like what the point is, but then I'm not sure what her point is.
Yeah.
And but it reads and codes so hard like that to me that it felt like and again, when that line in the movie, I was like, okay, well, they clearly saw the same thing and doubled down on it because that line, it's not a lifestyle choice. I was born this way. There's no way that was an accident. This movie was made in 2009.
Think not.
Like, yeah. But anyways, I was very weirded out not weirded out. I was just unsure of what I was supposed to be gathering from that.
If there is that subtext there, then I'm not sure what we're supposed to get from it.
I mean, best reading, it is that is what it's coded as, and it's not, they're actually good guys. It's all fine. It's not, it seems maybe weird and unusual and you don't understand it and you're not sure what it is. But again, not all of it tracks, I think is my biggest problem with it, is that like the metaphor with Jacob I don't know if it tracks. Like, I don't know if the details line up. But if the overarching message is, there are these guys that the story has coded as potentially gay, and one of our main characters is weirded out by them, doesn't like them, is unsure of them, doesn't want to hang out with them, whatever, and then ultimately finds out that they're not weird. They're not. They're just normal guys. That's actually, it's fine. That's like the best reading of it, maybe.
Right.
I don't know if I feel like that's probably not Stephenie Meyer's point. I also don't even think it's necessarily the movie's point. It doesn't lean into it really, other than that line. Anyways, it was something I wanted to bring up because it was something that struck me numerous times over the course of the book and watching the movie. So, movie does a great job nailing the plot, not starting till 3/4 of the way through the book again.
Yeah,
2 books in a row. Do any of the later ones have a plot that starts earlier?
I recall Eclipse being my favorite because there was more of like a plot and like action to it. Could be misremembering that. I'll put that little caveat on there. There's definitely more of a through line plot in Breaking Dawn.
And I'm not trying to be like overly like, oh, fucking, where's the plot? Like, but it's just I found it a little frustrating that it takes so long for the narrative to get going. Like, I enjoy character pieces. I can even enjoy if there was no, like if something is just like a slice of life type of thing, but it just feels like such a misuse of pacing and time, right? To spend 3/4 of your book just with characters.
It's frustrating because it feels like we should be doing something.
Yeah,
but we're
I guess
not.
that's the thing that I find frustrating is it's like, I get that the characters are important and it's like the main draw and all that sort of thing, and I love character pieces and stuff, but then why do we have a plot at all then? Like, I don't know. It's just I don't know.
I thought the movie nailed the scene where Bella rides the motorcycle and crashes.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I imagined from the. I imagined more trees. They do it on like an empty country
which
road.
And that might have been like a safety thing.
Yeah, for sure. Because I imagine them like on a wooded road. I think it even says like they're like a tree lined road in the book, whereas in the movie it's kind of just out in a field or whatever. But yeah, it is very similar.
I also thought it nailed the awkward movie going.
Yes.
Third wheel.
The third wheel. The chapter's called Third Wheel.
Time to explore polyamory.
Yeah.
With Bella and Jacob and Mike.
Not with Jacob and Mike.
No.
With Jacob and Edward, sure. Not Jacob. Mike, okay. Let's revise our list of suitable mates for Bella. We had at the bottom Edward, then Jacob. At the bottom Edward, then Jacob, then Alice, then just Bella being her best self. We have to revise that. It goes Mike, then Edward, then Jacob.
Mike shouldn't even be on that list. Mike's on a different list in a different book in another room.
Yeah. No, for sure. Mike's the worst. Which I didn't hate him in the first one, but man, he's an obnoxious. He's only in this one a little bit. But he does this thing that's literally the worst thing ever. And it's not in the movie. This explicit little detail of their date. They're driving to the movie theater, which we don't see in the movie. And Jacob and Bella are sitting in the front seat. Or Jacob's driving and Bella's riding shotgun and Mike's in the back. And the whole drive there, at one point, he puts his chin on the back of Bella's seat. And like leaves his face there next to her. Just so he can be involved in it's the cringiest, worst thing. You post and cringe, Mike. I need you to stop. But the movie does capture that one particular moment.
Where she's sitting in between them in the theater, and both of them have a hand out ready for her to take it at any moment.
Yeah. They both have their hand on an armrest, and I love the camera shot. The shot composition in that particular moment is really well, and she does a really good job showing her sort of how uncomfortable she is. Yeah, but the way the shot just lingers as it pulls out and shows them sitting there, it made me chuckle. It was a well done scene. Also, they kept in this line, which is like another one of the worst aspects of Jacob. But this is also once he's starting to become a werewolf a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's when he's starting on the beginning of the transformation. But he tells Bella she should hold out for someone stronger, someone who laughs at the gore that makes weaker men vomit. That's a line that he says, and it's, yep. Don't say things like that, Jacob. I liked you. I liked you. Stop it. And they also kept in the plot line of some of the people getting the stomach flu. which is literally only in the story to mislead us about Jacob's deal.
Yeah.
Right? It's gotta be.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's only there so that we think he has the stomach flu
But
initially.
they didn't include the scene where Bella gets the stomach flu,
No.
so we don't watch Kristen Stewart throwing up in a bathroom for 3 hours. Which was nice.
I thought the movie did a good job with Bella and Jacob's fallout post the wolfening. And I also thought it did a good job of her encounter with LaRon in the meadow.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, pretty much the same.
And this is the thing that I thought Jacob did in the book really well, is that when he comes after the very frustrating scene where he's like a jerk to her in both the book and the movie, I disliked it even more in the movie, but whatever. He comes to visit her that night, like we mentioned earlier, and he hops in her room. I was very pleased in the book and in the movie, but even more so in the book, with how he explains without explaining the situation. He gives her a bunch of hints to help her figure it out. And I found that incredibly satisfying because I was really dreading that he was going to show up and be like, I'm sorry I was a jerk, but I can't tell you. And she goes, what can't you tell me? I can't, I'm sorry. And then leave or something. And then we have to deal with her like, I don't know what he's but no, he's like, no, remember that day on the beach? Because I remember that. I read the book. I need you to say the thing that I remember. And thank God he did. He was like, hey, remember last book when we were on the beach and I told you that story about my ancestors? Do you remember that? And she's like, no. And I'm like, oh, fuck. But she does at least pretty much immediately come up with the answer. And I did really appreciate, though, because that can be very frustrating to read and watch. When characters, when I know that they know something and they won't say the thing I want them to say, which in this moment, Jacob said exactly what I would want him to say. Okay, if you have some weird rule that you can't tell her what it is, give her some hints.
Yeah.
And he does that. And I was like, oh, thank God. And then she figures it out. And I was like, oh, thank God. I don't have to deal with this, that stupid misunderstanding trope of just, it's just so tiring. And I'm glad that I was really, really glad that I didn't have to deal with that in either of them.
And then after she figures it out, she has a kind of a monologue about, is it possible that everything is real and all of the stories are true?
Yeah.
Da-da-da.
Yeah.
But that is directly from the book. Made it into the movie.
I thought the set dressing, the set design for Emily's kitchen did a really good job of capturing the warmth and comfortableness, comfort of what is described in the book. It just seems like a very warm, inviting, friendly atmosphere. And we're only in the kitchen for one short, brief scene in the movie. But I thought they did a good job of capturing that element from the book.
And I was glad that they kept the line when Bella comes in and Emily says, you're the vampire girl. And Bella's like, well, you're the wolf girl.
Yeah. And although the movie adds a line that doesn't make a lot of sense, or at least not grammatically, she goes, you're the wolf girl. And she kind of chuckles. And Emily goes, no, I'm just marrying one. I'm like, you're marrying a wolf girl? Pardon me? Where, what? That's not what I read in the book. But yeah.
I thought the movie nailed Alice showing up and the two of them jetting off to Italy. Alice Grand Theft Autoing the yellow Porsche.
Yep.
And then Bella stopping / rescuing Edward and like the tense run through the square. I thought they did a good job with that.
Through the fountain and everything. They built that fountain. I don't think I included this in the prequel notes, but I read that they found that square and they were really happy with it, but it didn't have a fountain, so they built that fountain in the middle of the square for that.
Does that town just get to have a fountain now?
And they built it out of prop. It was like wood. It's like a prop fountain. It didn't last very long. I don't think it would hold up very well. I did like the weird underground office building. I thought they, because it's mentioned in the book, like they go through these like dank, like dungeony tunnels, and then they open a door and it's like an office building.
Then they have an awkward elevator ride.
Yeah, and the movie, the movie didn't quite capture it as well as the book, but it was close, where it, like the awkward elevator ride and stuff captured the essence of like the sort of office building feel that I got from the book. But the explicit shot in the book that that I wanted in the movie is that they open the door and she describes this big long gray hallway with like fluorescent lighting, and I just immediately pictured like every office building hallway you've ever been in.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to look that mundane and boring, and they don't quite get the elevator captures that a little bit, but it's not quite. I was just picturing like the hallway from the second Matrix movie or something like it. But yeah, it's still pretty good.
I was picturing the upstairs hallway from the place we both used to work.
Yeah, yes, that works too. That is very similar.
Which was also a long gray hallway with fluorescent lights.
Overhead lighting and doors off the sides. Yeah. Yes. And then finally, we mentioned him before, but Michael Sheen.
Yeah.
He nails it. Is better.
Improves it.
Yeah. It's just everything.
Either way, he was the highlight of the film.
He was perfection, and I can't wait for more of him. All right. That's it. Those were all the different, let's see. That was what was better, what was worse, what was the same. We have our special Just for Twilight segment. Bryan predicts the Twilight Saga.
It's gonna happen, Edward. I've seen it.
All right, we're going to go over my previous predictions. I was 0 for 0 for 0 for 0. Didn't get any of these right, but we're going to go through them. So my predictions for New Moon were, first, Bella becomes a vampire. Not yet. It is discussed, though. They bring it up. It's going to be a thing going forward. Edward, overcome with a desire, accidentally eats another human, and Bella has to decide if she's going to forgive him. That absolutely does not happen. He does try to kill himself, but doesn't try to eat anybody. He talks about it in the book, that he considered...
Alice says that he considers like going on a killing spree through Volterra.
But he didn't want Carlisle to be disappointed in him. Yeah. And then final prediction was that either Rosalie or Emmett dies, and none of them are even in the book. So I mean, they're in it, but for like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
So no. All right. My wishes for New Moon were Alice and Bella romance subplot picks up speed. I would say arguably yes. The bite me scene that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to count that as a win. Second one was we get to watch one of the vampires chewing on a deer or a bear. Unfortunately, we don't see a vampire eat anything on camera in this one that I recall. We hear it off camera.
Yeah.
But I don't think we see anybody, and then finally, Mike tries to fight Edward, and since Edward is trying to blend in, he has to let him win. And unfortunately, that does not happen. Almost happened with Jacob.
Yeah.
Jacob tries to fight Mike.
Yeah.
In the movie, but doesn't go anywhere.
Do you still want that win for Mike, though?
No, I don't. I didn't even want that win for Mike. I just wanted that loss for that L for Edward. More than anything. All right. So I did a terrible job. But here are my new predictions for Twilight Saga Eclipse. Jacob and Edward have a big fight. Obviously, this was teased at the end of this one, but I'm looking for a knockdown, drag-out fight over Bella. Not over Bella, necessarily. I mean, ultimately, that is it. But over her potentially becoming a vampire. I think that may happen. Second prediction. Victoria gets a hold of Charlie and uses him as bait to get Bella away from, like, the Cullens. They're able... It's very similar to the first one with her mom. They're able to save Charlie... But Victoria gets away, and now Charlie knows about vampires, and we got to deal with that whole situation. Because I think at some point we're going to have to deal with Charlie and the vampires. Something's going to have to happen there.
It sounds like...
Charlie and the vampires. That's his post-grunge band that he formed.
Okay, I'm better.
Because at some point with Bella and everything, something's going to have to come to a head there.
Sure, yeah.
And then finally, I predicted it in the last one, but I'm going to predict it again in this one. Bella's going to become a vampire. My guess, and Edward is going to be the one who does it. And I think it's going to be it's going to probably happen at the end of the next one, but I think it's going to be one of the sort of the inciting incident that's going to lead it to happen is that she's going to be partially motivated by her desire to keep Charlie safe after the whole Victoria debacle, where Victoria almost kills Charlie. And she's like, look, you guys, I need to be able to keep him safe. And I can't do that unless I have powers. I need to be a vampire. I mean, among all the other things motivating her wanting to be a vampire, but that's like a practical motivation potentially. Those are my 3 predictions. Here are my wishes. First, Aro comes to visit Forks to check in on how the Bella situation is going, and they have to show him around town. And basically, I just want like an Aro travel blog. Or like picture diners, drive-ins, and dives but Aro instead of Guy Fieri. Oh, scratch that, Aro and Guy Fieri. Traveling around forks.
I enjoyed that performance so much. I would 100% watch a spin-off movie of him just being creepily delighted by things.
Yes. He is, to be fair, he's like a character almost, I think that's what's so fun about him. He's like a character like plucked out of What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah.
Like he would just fit right into that show. Like that would be a freaking great cameo. If in What We Do in the Shadows, Aro was there one time, just like, and he was playing the exact same type of character. He would fit right in. It would be great. Second, I'm going to switch this order. Second, Evil Alice. I want a Dark Willow turn for Alice that then swings for sometime over the course of the next one, and then that swings around back for the last one, and she becomes good again and helps save the day or whatever. But I want an Evil Alice turn for a book or for a period of time. And finally, I want the first time that Edward and Bella to have sex to also be the time that he turns her into a vampire. Because if Edward doesn't turn her into a vampire as they are fucking, what even is the point of these books? Those are my wishes and my predictions for Twilight Saga Eclipse. Katie, we've got a few odds and ends, and then we'll get to the final verdict.
I thought the narrative, what's the word I'm looking for here? The narrative structure of having Bella send emails to Alice as a way to work her voiceover into the movie was
not bad.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's necessarily an improvement on the book, so I don't have it in any of my sections. But I did think it was interesting. I thought it was at least a semi-natural way to work her voiceover in. And
I agree.
was better than the first movie handled that.
Yeah, for sure. There's a moment in the beginning where when Carlisle's stitching up Bella, where they're talking about God, like it's a big discussion they have. And one of the the motivating reason for the discussion in the narrative is so that Bella can learn one of the reasons why Edward is so opposed to turning into a vampire is that when she becomes a vampire, she'll lose her soul and thus be damned to an eternity in hell or whatever. But I thought it was interesting that Carlisle's talking to her and he says, his dad was like a clergyman and he didn't agree with his dad's religion because his dad was very like, he was like a 16th century, or whatever.
Don't they say in the first book he's like a Calvinist or something like that?
Yeah. Very stringent.
Very fire and
brimstone type of guy. And he wasn't into that, but he still believes in God. And he says, not even the fact that that he's not even what I see in the mirror makes me question the existence of God. And I was like, to me, I was like, the fact that vampires exist wouldn't dampen my belief that vampires or that God is like possible, like magical undead creatures that come back to life isn't a mark against the idea that God exists. Right? If anything, it's like
finding out that vampires exist. Like, I don't even know why Bella's remotely surprised about werewolves.
Oh yeah, well,
and just be like, okay,
or any of that stuff.
Sure,
yeah. But that's what I was saying. Like, if I exist in a world where vampires are real, like God becomes an infinitely more plausible.
Everything is on the table now.
Infinitely more plausible idea to me in that universe, and it's just funny that the book was like. Took it the opposite way that vampires existing, you would think God doesn't exist, right? I'm like, wait, no, what? Why? God exists in every universe that vampires exist in. They're like demons. They're like literal demons. Like, okay, sure.
I'm very concerned about Bella's mental health throughout this story. We talked about the hallucinations. She's also having shrieking nightmares.
Oh my God.
Every night. They were showing that in the movie and I was like, you guys.
It was much more extreme in the movie than what I read it as. Like I read it her waking up like, like having like a...
Which is still concerning. If that's happening every night, that's still concerning. She's having night terrors every night. I'm like, Charlie... Take her to the doctor.
Yeah.
What? Help her.
Yeah. It's wild. And it's night terrors motivated by a thing, not like because I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I had a summer camp in Boy Scouts. I had a bunkmate who had night terrors. Did I mention this before?
I don't think you've ever told me that.
I had a bunkmate one year who had night terrors, and I didn't know.
Oh God.
I had no idea. I got woken up one time at like 2 a.m. to him. Bella in this movie doesn't do justice to how I was woken up. Like he was being murdered, like actively murdered, like it was insane. And
supposedly I had night terrors when I was like little.
Yeah.
I don't remember it, but I think that's not super uncommon for like little kids.
Yeah.
But...
Well, this was when we were early high school or middle school age, but it was. It's night terrors are wild. But yeah, she's having like full on screaming fits. Yeah. Not just like, oh no. Like she's like, ah! Like banshee screaming fits. Like, this is a little science nitpick, but there's a line in the book that says, I'll just find it and read it. But I didn't think it was right, and I looked it up and it's not. And again, it doesn't really matter, but, not tonight. Tonight the sky was utterly black. Perhaps there was no moon tonight. A lunar eclipse. A new moon. And I was like, I don't think... And then I looked it up, and lunar eclipses and new moons don't occur at the same time. They can't occur at the same time.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. So...
I thought this movie actually had some cool shots in it.
Yeah, it did. We talked a little bit about that in the prequel about some of the visual style choices they made, and I think it was a more competent film, relatively speaking, overall. Narratively, there was maybe slightly less going on. I think it suffered a little bit in that department, but I think overall, as like the direction was pretty good. It had more interesting things going on, at least, like the all the things we've mentioned, like the passage of time bit.
That was more like visual interest.
Yeah, the passage of time bit, the different shooting styles for the different relationships. Some of the and this is partially informed by budget, but the different way they depicted running fast and stuff versus what they did in the first movie, all just felt a lot better in this one. There's a little line in this one, and it just made me chuckle, because wasn't this one originally going to be Breaking Dawn? Wasn't the sequel originally going to be Isn't that what you said?
It was breaking something.
I don't know.
Because the one that she originally wrote ended up becoming the basis for Breaking Dawn, which is the 4th book.
Okay. Well, there's this line in this that when they're going, Jacob's taking her somewhere, and she sees Carlisle's car in front of her house, and she's like, "Oh, Cullens are here." And the line in the book says, "He watched dawn break across my face," and I was like, "Is that a title drop to a future book?" What's going on? That was interesting.
Kind of, I guess.
Yeah, that was a few odds and ends, a few general notes, but it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
I actually liked this book a lot more than I remember liking it when I was a teenager. I think I was distracted and upset by the story not going the way I thought it would at that time. But as an adult, I am more able to appreciate her relationship with Jacob and how it develops. I did forget what a huge asshat Jacob becomes once he turns into a werewolf, and that was pretty disappointing. But I did appreciate that both Bella and Edward came to a deeper understanding of each other's feelings at the end. However, I think this time I'm going to give it to the movie. While there were some changes that I disagreed with, I think that the movie by and large either nailed or improved upon most of the important things, and I liked that the Edward-Bella dynamic was at least slightly more palatable, as well as Jacob being less of a jerk post the wolfening.
I agree. I would also give it to the movie on this one. The movie to me was far less boring than the book. I did struggle with this book more than the first one because it felt so similar at times. I mean, there's different things going on, but I found the book exceedingly tedious, and we spend so long just getting the Jacob and Bella relationship going in the same way we did with the Bella and Edward relationship going. And it's not that it's bad. Like, I enjoyed elements of it. Like I said, I had notes throughout where I was like, I really prefer this to listening to Edward and Bella interact. I still found myself waiting for something to happen, though. I just waiting for something to happen that isn't just them hanging out. And the movie captures everything important from the book, and then the changes that it makes that we mentioned, I think, were really smart, and you kind of summed it up in that it improves upon everything. It includes everything that we needed from the book and improves upon other things even more. And the slight negatives versus the book are far outweighed by the positive changes that they made. So I am also giving this one to the book.
To the movie.
The movie. So that's now, this is the first time ever, right?
This is the first
for the
summer series we've had that did not strongly go one way. Yeah.
And explicitly to the book. We've gone to the book. No.
All our Harry Potter went to the book.
And all of
Lord of the Rings went to the movie. This one is, I think, is probably going to be back and forth.
Yeah.
We might even disagree.
Interesting.
Who knows?
We almost did on the first one. I almost went movie on the first one. Almost. I ended up landing on the book, but I almost went movie. So
I know, because you read my amazing argument.
I was. I'm not. I'll admit I was convinced by yours, but I was teetering. Mm-hmm. But yeah, your argument definitely helped push me over into the book side. But yeah, it was interesting. This is our first time that we've switched. And to be fair, this is probably the one, at least I'll say for me, this is definitely the series that I've had the least attachment to in any sort of way.
I think this and Lord of the Rings might be even like neck and neck for me as far as like emotional attachment.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of emotional attachment to this series when I was in like the target demographic for it.
Yeah.
And then Lord of the Rings I did not come to until like later.
Yeah.
In life, quote unquote. I was like in college.
Right.
So
yeah, this one, so the Harry Potter one, I had a huge attachment to the books. Lord of the Rings, I had a huge attachment to the movies.
Yeah.
This one I have no attachment to either. So it's kind of, we're going through, it'll be interesting what our next one.
It's a journey of discovery.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any that I have a huge attachment to both. The closest would be Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Because I do like the movies, a lot of them in different ways, but I can't think of it. I don't think there's any series where I like love both. Yeah. Interesting. That's that for this episode. You can do us a huge favor before we get and reveal what's next, because we're not going to Eclipse next. We're going to take one episode break, talk about a different film, and then we'll get back to Eclipse. But before Katie reveals what that film is, you could do us a giant favor. You can go to patreon.com/thisfilmislit, support us for $2, $5, or $15 a month. If you do that, that'd be awesome. It's really helpful. Helps us do stuff, pay for stuff, And if you support, you get things at different levels. So do that. Also, if you can't do that, you can do us a huge favor. You can go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review and rating. You can go to Stitcher and leave us a 5-star review and rating.
Hey,
because
Stitcher.
We're finally back on Stitcher. All of our episodes have been updated. All it took apparently was me just tweeting at Stitcher support, and they were like, fixed. And I was like, okay.
All right.
If I would have known it was that easy, I would have taken care of it a long time
We've only
ago.
been trying to figure this out for a year.
Yeah. So all of our episodes are up on Stitcher now. Every single one of them.
I guess the real test will be whether or not this episode uploads.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Stitcher.
We'll find out tomorrow if it if it's still working, but I don't see why it wouldn't.
Yeah.
They didn't say what they did. They just said fixed, and it was. So there you go.
Code things.
But we have 2 reviews. We have 2 5-star reviews on Stitcher.
Nice.
And one of them was from a couple months ago when we weren't having new episodes on there. So somebody listened to our old episodes.
Thank you for that, person.
It might be the person who tweeted at us. I don't know. But you can support us, or you can review us on Stitcher now and listen to all of our episodes. We could use more reviews on there. Like I said, we only have 2. We're up to like 74 on iTunes, which is great. We appreciate that. But if you leave us those reviews, it helps a lot. Just spreads us out even more. Gets more ears on this podcast. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads. Do us a favor. We've had an issue Facebook doesn't seem to want to share our stuff with people.
The Facebook algorithm doesn't like us. I think if you go to our page, you can like explicitly follow us, or there's something that you can
like
select
settings,
to like see, to like adjust the settings to like see more posts.
Yeah.
I can look into that and we can talk about it on the next.
Yeah, we'll mention it because we had somebody say that we mentioned that we haven't been getting as much engagement on like polls and stuff, and somebody did mention that they felt like they have not been seeing our content. So there's a chance that the algorithm's just burying us for whatever reason. So if you can go to our page and do the follow, the notification, whatever.
I'll take a look and I'll see exactly what you might need to do, and we can talk about it on the next prequel.
Yeah. Because that would be good, because we would like more engagement on the polls.
Yeah, especially all the posts, but especially the polls, because our follow-up fan poll segments are way more interesting when we have feedback and when we are able to get that engagement from people.
Absolutely. So that would be great. Katie, what's next?
Well, speaking of our Patreon, as you were a few minutes ago, one of our rewards at the $15 level.
Yes, if you're a $15 a month patron.
You're a $15 a month patron. One of the rewards is priority recommendations. So we take your recommendations and we don't always get to them immediately, but we work them into our schedule where they make sense as quickly as we can. And up next, we are doing a patron request from our very first patron, the original patron, Alina Doletkalova, and we will be talking about Starship Troopers.
Fun. I can't wait. It's going to be interesting. I haven't seen the movie in years.
I have never seen the movie, never read the book. I'm not looking forward to reading the book.
I am
looking forward to the movie.
It'll be interesting. It's from what I understand, it's a tale of two worlds there with the book and the movie.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those movies though that can be easily misinterpreted by people, similar to like Fight Club, because it is very much a.
Maybe I'll get to add to my list of movies that white men insist on misinterpreting.
No, this absolutely goes on that list. This is a movie that you can watch and see as a blinding, biting satire send-up of fascism, or you can watch it and be like, "Yay, fascism!" Yeah. Supposedly, I when I saw this movie, I was too young to like gather much subtext. I was like, space bugs and aliens, boobs, yay. But yeah, but supposedly the book is like a little more fashy than. Well, we'll see. We'll get into that discussion. It'll be interesting. So come back in 1 week's time. We'll have a prequel episode. We'll talk about. We'll do a little preview of Starship Troopers and do some other stuff. And hear your feedback, your comments on New Moon. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're talking about Starship Troopers. And until that time, guys, gals, non-binary, space bugs, and everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.